And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my live coverage of the UK election. I just figured I'd start it up now, and we will get our guests on in a minute. I've had a number of people approach me about wanting to come on, which is good because I'm not super familiar with this election. So let me just get a election map up. And then I will start taking callers, I guess. Let's see here. All right. So let's see here. We have. So if you want to come on, just message me somewhere. Let me just undo that. All right. Invite. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, there's one person. There's a second person. Let's see here. Who else wanted to come on? Who else wanted to come on? Just trying to remember. Well, there's 2 invites at any rate. Okay, Fritz wants to come on. Okay, sure, Fritz, you can come on. All right. Will Serp be joining? I'm not sure. He's probably busy tonight. He's coming. We're doing a stream together tomorrow about whether or not the Germans could have won World War II with any luck. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah. All right, then. Fritz, I sent you a link to the Discord chat. How it works is I route the Discord chat through here. Okay. England be looking thick, TBH. Yeah, England's a thick country in many ways. So, I'm not super familiar with what the election campaign's been like. That's a good way to start a stream where you're covering something live. But, yeah. Oh, there we go. It looks like this is finally working. Maybe. Is that working now?
Hello?
Oh, 1 second. Oh. Hello, my good man.
Hi Argent, how you doing?
Good, yourself?
Yeah, I'm pretty good at the moment.
Do you just want to maybe introduce yourself to the
Yeah, sure.
crowd?
My name is Marcus. Come from Scotland. And yeah, this result's looking pretty bad in Scotland, not gonna lie. Looks like a SNP wipeout.
Isn't
Which
it
is also
always,
bad.
though?
Well, it wasn't last election. Um, I think this election was dominated by tactical voting among the middle class. And so basically, a lot of the middle class people I've been talking to have been voting for like the candidate which will beat the Tories, which is SNP.
Right.
The yeah, this election is quite reminiscent of 2017,
Right.
insofar as that it's a lot of it's dominated by Brexit. The Conservative Party have sort of they've just sort of been repeating the same slogan over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
This time the slogan's much better, but it looks like it's going to be a pretty decisive Conservative victory.
Yeah, I
Uh,
saw the exit polls as well. The liberal Owen Jones is already apologizing, and people are already melting down on Twitter.
well, of course.
I would say, I'm sorry, sorry to Farage and the Brexit Party for not winning any seats, but for not being projected to win any seats. But if this means that there is some sort of actual Brexit deal that goes through, then obviously it won't really matter.
I mean, I suppose I'm not very optimistic on the whole Boris's deal. It seems very close to just staying in the EU. Except this time, nobody will care. Like there will be nobody will care. There'll just be a tiny fringe of Brexiteers who
Oh,
nobody.
by the way, everybody, Fritz is on. Hey, Fritz, good to
Hi.
have you on, man. He has his own YouTube channel. Most of you are probably already subs, but I will
I'm sorry.
put a link into his chat, to his channel into the chat.
I just released my most decisive video, probably, of people that follow me, which is why I actually support the Hong Kong protesters, or at least, if not like saying we should actively support them, but just saying I'm sick of people on the right saying, "Hey, China's base, China's great."
I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I just wouldn't support the Hong Kong protests. I mean, I don't particularly like China, but the whole thing is very clearly American funded, and I just don't know if I can get behind it.
Anyways, I wanted to get a British person's perspective. What do you think of Boris Johnson?
Boris Johnson is, I mean, it's a bit like Trump. He's not a very attractive character. He's sort of had affairs. You know, he's got a sort of embarrassing past. But I think he's sort of more of the sort of free trade type of people. Like, he was. If you look at his sort of campaign, he's not really against mass immigration. He's not really a huge. He's more on like the sort of sovereignty and let's do trade with the third world rather than with the EU because of classical liberalism.
I have an expression: pulls out, Packy's in, civic.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Boris Johnson. The thing is that this is this is an election where it's very much the case that it's either that or it's an absolutely insane person. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn would be, I mean, not to be a sort of boomer, but I mean, he would be an economic disaster. He wants to add something like £400 billion to like the environment, and like he wants to make sure that for every 4 interns that you hire, one of them has to be an environment intern.
What?
Like he has like
what the
all of
fuck
these.
does that even mean? Does he
means
just
you have to
plant
hire-
trees?
Yeah, I was gonna say you have to
Yeah.
hire your new diversity hire is a plant or an animal to work with you.
Yeah, it's
This
ridiculous.
is Jerry. He's a bear. He's now gonna be. He's our new head of accounting. But Jerry, what do you think about the sales figure?
No, the Labour manifesto it's ludicrous. I mean, if you read through it, it's absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, Academic Agent did a pretty good stream on it. I'm not a huge fan of his, but he did do a pretty good stream on it. It's just beyond belief. So he was never going to get elected, really. It just wouldn't have happened.
Do you think there's a high? Do you think there's a high possibility that he's going to that he's going to be ousted as Labour leader after this?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because essentially, I think that he's like Jeremy Corbyn. He's like a fossil of the left movement from the old Labour. The old sort of Labour strategy was a sort of coalition between sort of urbanite leftists with kind of working class white people. And Corbyn still sort of seems to be living in that world, in a sense, whereas the modern demographic sort of strategy of the left across the Western world has really been foreigners, the LGBT, and Corbyn is clearly getting in on this stuff as well, but it just doesn't seem to be working. He's not a kind of, he has all these really, really socialist ideas economically, which honestly I just don't think are plausible, and I don't think he could win it. There's going to be a really crappy person who comes after him.
You know, it was funny because when I was in the UK last November, I went to Oxford, and the first thing the tour guide said is, "We're sorry for Boris Johnson."
Yeah, I mean, like, this is the only piece of joy that I take from these elections. Like, in Australia, they had like a conservative win. Like, I really don't like these kind of mainstream conservative parties, but the level of salt is just, it's very enjoyable.
I mean, from my understanding, Boris Johnson's like super pro immigration. He's super socially liberal. He's kind of a degenerate in his personal life.
So
But
he's a modern Tory.
yeah, but he's
Yeah.
just, there's so much salt like of people who hate him that it just makes me like him by kind of default. I think it's a
Because
little
but
unfair.
he has some association as being somewhat like Donald Trump. So therefore it's like, oh, you're another Austrian. You must be Hitler.
Yeah, but like Trump, I think people are unfair to Trump to compare him. Trump is like a lot better on most issues.
Trump
Well,
is considered better than Johnson.
He has been co-opted. He just recently signed a bill saying that it's going to saying like some executive order now. It's saying officially labeling Jews as a protected group on college campuses and saying we're going to withhold funding from groups that don't support Israel.
Yeah, but that's always anyways, let's not talk about Israel right now.
Well, Johnson, he's pretty bad. Essentially, people were really optimistic about him. Not in my circles, but a lot of people on the sort of distant right were optimistic about him because he seemed to be very uncompromising on the issue of Brexit. You know, he's had all this rhetoric about rather die in a ditch, but he then went out to the EU to sort of get a deal. And I think it's pretty clear that he never intended to go through with no deal. He wanted to sort of get his deal through and then, sort of take ownership of it. But his deal is awful. But he's just the kind of best we can get. And honestly, I think I mean I think I'd have to take him over Corbyn because of. I mean, I think I'd personally, in my own personal life, be quite severely damaged if Corbyn were actually to win the election.
I mean, and we like to like say, "Oh, boomer cons who care about taxes," but like once you start actually like working for a living, and you see like a third of your paycheck disappear into the mall.
Yeah, no. In modern sort of techno capital, the kind of wealthy will probably just get out, and the sort of thing you can imagine is like just sort of ordinary people being absolutely just hammered by these tax raises in order to fund like these ridiculous environment projects and stuff.
You're seeing if you want to see the end result of it, it is cities like San Francisco and LA, which are pretty much dystopian nightmares. The only hope for people, the tiny amount of middle class people living there, is that you're at least allowed to leave LA, because like you have I know he's kind of a meme, but I do like Paul Joseph Watson's videos on like Los Angeles is a shithole or whatever, just showing how this is a dystopian society where you have like increasingly medieval conditions like the bubonic plague, and there's like tens of millions of rats in the city and over 60,000 homeless people. So you just have this tiny underclass, this massive underclass of immigrants and homeless people and people who can barely work because there's not really any jobs for working or middle class people in LA anymore. And then just this elite gated community in Hollywood or wherever.
Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you to River Run, who sent $10 and said Merry Christmas. Thank you very much. And Akira Joker Kurisu, who said, Dominic Cummings, too smart for you, 4D chess. Who's Dominic Cummings?
Dominic Cummings is he's like, I think he's the whip. I'll have to check this out.
Oh, okay.
I have to say, I don't keep up a lot with modern sort of political day-to-day developments because it's just so boring
and depressing.
Yeah.
It's what was I gonna say again? Something about.
Oh yeah, he was like the campaign director of Vote Leave, and then he appointed him special advisor. He's special advisor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think, have you seen the show Westminster? Yes, Minister rather.
No, I have not.
Oh, it's actually really good. It's a 1980s sort of time warp, but it kind of is the only show which kind of captures how politics actually works, which is really the civil service running rings around these kind of democratically elected characters.
Right.
But basically, like, you have the special advisor from the prime minister who's just sort of an idiot, and they get completely manipulated by the sort of people in the civil service who have much more influence. But yeah, no, that's probably a reference to the fact that, like, sort of Sargon crew, they all think Dominic Cummings is some sort of like genius who like 40 chess the whole thing. But I mean, it's just obviously not the case, you know.
But sorry, I was gonna say is somebody I know, the distributist, his now wife, when she was before she met him, she was working like I think as an intern in Ottawa, and apparently they just said that they like to keep Trudeau busy on his stupid outings. Like it's actually better for the civil service when he's out in India making an embarrassment of himself, because then they can get actual work done.
Yeah, because he has no idea what the
moron.
fuck he's doing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I know, Arjun, one question I had, or I think it was something Serp Kerp said, of how I love that phrase that the Democratic debates is basically four skeletons and the Antichrist.
Yep.
I know three of them is Bernie, Biden, and Warren. Who's the fourth?
Bloomberg.
Oh, I keep forgetting because
He is actually not running. He's not taking part in the debates. He's just campaigning in the states.
he's disgusting. There some hope for me. It was either him or our horrible governor. No, it was Bloomberg. He was like in some parade in downtown Manhattan, and you had a whole bunch of like white New Yorkers just screaming and booing at him, saying you're a fucking piece of shit. It gave me some hope.
Right. So, yeah. So do you think Brexit will really matter, like if it actually happens?
I actually don't think it matters whether it happens or not, because to be honest, the European Union doesn't look like a sustainable project at the moment. I think that the Brexit has more or less, to me, been a rather amusing demonstration of the sort of stuff I've been reading about, because it's like a sort of encapsulates ideas about the cathedral in a sort of nice three-act play. It's ridiculous. Like, the people vote for something which the elites don't like. So the elites put in a candidate, Theresa May, who then goes on to not do the thing for about 3.5 years. Then, somebody, Boris Johnson, who tries to get it done, just gets basically crushed like a little bug. The Supreme Court went against him. The Parliament, the Parliament, it went against everything you'd expect from a regular democratic institution. Like Corbyn, who'd been spoiling for a general election for years, suddenly backs down as soon as it looks like it would be bad for him, or it would allow Brexit to happen. They've created this like whole sort of choice where it's between no deal, which is like just associated with Sauron and just absolute, chaos and disaster, which we have to rule out, and just sort of backing them right into a corner, and so then Boris, he's like, oh, I would rather die in a ditch, and then he just completely caves in as soon as he goes to make a negotiation.
Right.
And meanwhile, the actual EU itself probably won't exist in 20 years. Like,
What makes you think that? I'm not saying I disagree, but what is your thought on why?
Why the EU won't last?
Why the EU?
The EU is unsustainable. Economically speaking, it's pretty unstable. Like they've instituted negative interest rate policies, which are pretty insane. They've had the whole migrant crisis. They have massive discontent right across the board. In the recent EU elections, they basically just appointed people in power who were utterly disconnected. Like, one of them was like the former military minister from Germany, and she like given the German army like broomsticks when they went up to like a you NATO like conference. Like it's just very corrupt. They're really disconnected. They don't have enough money to bail out the sort of southern European states that they illegally let in.
Especially after, because Britain was one of the few countries that was a net contributor, right?
Yeah. We were like hoiking over money to the EU, and that was one of the reasons why people were angry. But the whole thing just seems extremely unstable. So,
Well, I think what will, I mean, and the thing is, the only reason why I think countries like Poland, Hungary, and Poland and Hungary at this point are staying, well, number one is, although do they really need EU if they have NATO to protect them from Russia? But it's because like they obviously hate, they just continue to refuse to go along with the EU's migrant quotas, and the thing is, though, they still get a lot of money from the EU, so.
yeah, they get money and they hate the eternal Ruski.
If they can, yeah, I think it's like if Poland and like the base countries in Central Eastern Europe can, if they actually, I think it would be better if like, what would probably push them over the edge though would be if, say, like because they keep failing to do the migrant quotas, Poland just, instead of like some slap on the wrist and some warning, like if the EU actually tried to like either force them somehow to take in migrants or like heavily I don't know what sanction them, then I think there'd be a good case for them to leave.
I mean, I think that it's as simple as that if you run out of money to give these people, like Deutsche Bank is collapsing. I mean, Germany has a ridiculous economy. If they run out of money to sort of give these people, and they're like at the same time trying to pressure them into taking, third world migrants, it's just. Yeah,
I loved that Polish guy on British News who just said like this woke white woman's like, how many migrants have you taken? And the Polish guy's like, we have taken zero migrants or zero Muslims. Just she was just amazed how unapologetic he was. It was great.
So we have another person who joined us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm just, I mean, I don't actually probably even saying my name probably isn't the best thing, but yeah.
Is there something we can refer to you as?
You can call me, yeah, you can call me James, I guess.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I just sort of joined because I actually spoiled my ballot rather than vote. Because I can't give my vote to the Conservative Party. The thing is, Boris Johnson's policy on immigration is worse than Theresa May's was, by a very large margin.
Absolutely.
Like his stance is worse than Theresa May's on virtually everything other than on like LGBT education in schools. That's the only thing he's better on. The thing is that people in Britain fell for him, but purely because they thought he would be like Trump. They thought that he would be, like, oh, I'm going to build a wall, I'm going to stop immigration. But in an ironic way, he is exactly like Trump in that he, in that he's actually not going to do anything about these things. In fact, his policy on immigration is terrible, in the same way that Trump's policy on immigration is no better than Obama's policy on immigration.
Yeah, the difference between the Conservative Party and the Progressive Party in any major Western democracy cannot be measured in policies, but can only be measured in time. I mean, they're straight up like 2 years behind Corbyn at this point. Like,
they're 2 years behind Corbyn on everything but economics. That's the one thing that the Tories are still right wing on. Everything other than that, they're just
the one thing which absolutely doesn't matter.
Yeah, the one thing that like, quite frankly, I think if anything, I actually agree with the left on a lot of things. I don't like the free market. I don't like the way that this, because I think that this or you look at all the big businesses, they're the ones most supportive of mass immigration. And if you look at Boris Johnson's immigration plan, it is specifically built around economics. He's saying, we want to bring in the best and the brightest minds. We want to bring in scientists from all around the world, right? In other words, we will bring anyone in so long as they can pay. It's just purely focused on money.
No, it's pulls
No,
out,
honest-
packies in, civic.
Oh. Let's see. Well, I think basically the conservatives are basically like Labour, except they also like give the benefits to massive international corporations. Like, it's just so embarrassing.
Yeah, they're really barely any preferable. The only thing I care about the Tories on is that, quite frankly, they're not going to censor us, and they're not going to try as hard to indoctrinate kids.
Yeah, but did you see like the stuff in? Did you see the stuff in like the Labour manifesto about like let's educate children about the horrors of the British Empire? Like they want to like lock down educational institutions. And
the reason they're doing this is, quite frankly, they understand that they know about us. They're not silly. They know about us, and they know that there is a movement on the internet of people who are questioning the sort of narratives they've grown up with, right? And so their idea is that if you get the kids indoctrinated before they can ever hear about our side, then as soon as they hear someone saying, well, actually the British Empire did do all these bad things, if you actually look at the net economic effects of colonialism, if anything, it's a slight positive for these countries.
I mean, I wouldn't argue the empire was a good thing, but what I would argue is that the empire was, for most of its history, a waste of British resources. Probably was a large factor in World War One. So you can't exactly say that we like gained all of these great benefits from it over here.
I mean, I do think that there is something to be said about power projection from the empire. I think that,
which I think was largely gained from naval bases, though, not not having to occupy huge, well, not really occupy, but having to take over massive swaths of Africa that you're not really exploiting at all. Well, now, I think there is something to say about, say, the white colonies, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and, of course, what eventually became America.
Sure, I mean, we also got some rubber from Malaysia, but the fact is that, where did power projection get us, It
got you in a war with Germany that led you to lose 1 million of your best and brightest so that you could get Tanzania.
It created a lot of British imperial memes.
Yeah, therefore it was worthwhile. But I think another thing also is kind of just a psychological intimidation thing. You see all those bits on a map colored red. You don't want to go to war with that, even though in reality most of it is sort of, colonial subjects that aren't particularly loyal. It's still nonetheless, if you're the Kaiser or whatever, you're going to look at that and you're going to say, I don't want to fuck with that.
Well, if you're
Sorry
the Kaiser,
for the vulgarity.
Well, if you're the Kaiser, part of you is thinking, well, hold on a minute. I actually have the potential to inherit both that and the German Empire because I'm in line for the British throne. But Willie had a huge amount of love. He had like this very bizarre like love-hate relationship with Britain because he of course was half English and was raised by a liberal English mother and a liberal German father, but then at the same time was much more pulled into the Prussian militaristic direction by Bismarck and his grandfather. And eventually he looked up to the British Empire as a model. It sort of led him to, of course, go on. Well, Germany needs its place in the sun, and Germany needs a world-class navy.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways sorry.
I mean, if Corbyn gets into power, like the online movement in Britain is pretty much it's over. I mean, they'll be really like cracking up the like online hate speech laws, and that's the only reason. And I mean, so are the Conservatives, to be fair, but the Labour Party are doing it faster.
I think that's why even though I think most of us here, to be fair, most of us here are pretty much would consider ourselves like real nationalists, anti-immigration in general, far right wing. There is still something to be said that for now, having to ally or at least having to tacitly support the more conservative alt-right movement is necessary if they're the ones being trying to uphold people's free speech so that this dissident movement can reach more people.
I mean, that's the case in America, but it's really not the case over in Britain.
Mm.
The Conservative Party have done absolutely nothing to uphold free speech. I mean, they've been pretty weak on that issue. I'm pretty sure that like Theresa May passed like some hate speech laws, and Theresa May also was the same person who like turned around the Christian and sent them back to like Syria because Christianity is like a religion of hate. I mean, it's just not exactly the sort of government it relied on.
The thing that disturbs me the most about what's happened in the UK personally is the fact that it seems like you now have a two-tiered justice system in which Muslims can generally get away with anything they want, but anybody that criticizes them gets years in jail. Like I would consider the British police seem to be like disgusting traitors and are
they're an arm of Antifa. They're the military arm of Antifa.
They don't even have cool uniforms anymore. Their uniforms look gay.
I absolutely have a very strong, passionate hatred for the British police uniforms. I mean, there's just so much wrong with the British police. Like, they'll like violently go around like shooting people, but like they won't actually ever like hang people if they do something wrong. And like they go around in these obnoxiously loud cars with like all this gear on, and then they'll like crack down your door for hate speech, but they won't bother going after like burglary.
Like,
I mean,
or grooming gangs.
Like there was that guy who starred in the documentary The Jihadi Next Door, and then it turned out he was a terrorist, and they couldn't figure it out.
By the way, I just wanted to interject here. People have already forgotten the Telford grooming scandal.
Oh yeah.
People still remember Rotherham, but Telford, that's gone down the memory hole. And that was 1,000 as well. That was the size of Rotherham almost. And even at the time, it was ignored. It was covered up. And when I tell people about this, they just say, "I never even heard about this. I thought it was only Rotherham." This has probably happened God knows how many countries.
And it's still happening probably rapidly now.
Almost certainly.
Like, anybody who has any experience with like these communities, they know that they don't operate on the same rules. They don't really give a shit, And
Go ahead.
The British police, they're so incompetent at their jobs, but at the same time, they're very effective at like just intimidating people, who are like trying to call this stuff out.
I was gonna say though, like I had to interject on, if we're talking about terrible uniforms, can we please stop using berets as standard military headwear? I like helmets again. I'm sorry, but I get a hard on anytime I think of giant pickelhaubes gleaming whilst marching down the Brandenburg Gate. I want that again.
I personally have a thing for peaked caps over helmets, but
oh yeah, no, the pith helmet's pretty cool. I have a replica of one. I was gonna say is something I learned recently is that the Hohenzollern family in Germany now is like they're now demanding the crown back, not for full restoration, but just so they can own it, and they want a bunch of their palaces back. But the BS excuse German courts are trying to come up with to not let them have it is that was Kaiser Wilhelm.
Do we have a?
I'm pretty sure I remember him writing in like some newspaper
Yeah,
that like he hated them because he thought they were a bunch of thugs and that they were just sort of.
He said something to the amount of something to the point of like, Hitler's like, he's this guy alone, and even though he's like building these armies and these, this like mechanized like machine empire, he doesn't actually understand what it means to build a country. He's like, countries are built on faith, family, and tradition.
Yeah, I think his view on them was essentially that they're too materialistic. In that his view was that they built quite a lot of success materially. They essentially did make Germany very, very strong, but that they had done really nothing to actually preserve German tradition, which was kind of a sort of ironic thing.
They wanted to destroy it. Hitler had this idea. He wanted to completely level Berlin so he can make his psychotic Welthauptstadt. Welthauptstadt Germania was going to be where Berlin was, and that's where you have the giant Volkshall, which was going to have its own it would have had its own. It could have reigned in there because it was so massive and ridiculous.
Oh, sorry. Someone just sent in a super chat. $1 from Kyle Dawson. Basketball English woman just elected in Newcastle. Who's basketball English woman?
She Onwura. That does not sound,
It's very, very British.
Well, no. You know who was
yeah,
running? Wait, who was? Oh, the Lib Dem party was Alwi Aveyi.
I don't know anyone that can pronounce these names properly, but the Liberal Democrats.
Results have come in.
A couple.
Oh, I have. Oh, okay.
That's the first person elected.
Okay.
There's 2 people who've been elected: Newcastle upon Tyne Central, Labour hold, and Houghton and Sunderland South. Just some places in Newcastle, Northumberland.
Yeah, Newcastle.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just one other thing I need to bring up. Andrew Scheer resigned today.
Andrew Scheer.
Yep. So he's no longer
He's
the leader of
the Canadian
Conservative Party. Yep.
Oh yeah, him.
I think there's a scandal about him misappropriating party funds for his kid's private school.
Gas.
A politician misusing funds.
I mean, I think
Unbelievable.
that's why I think there is hope. There is hope for anti-democracy or some sort of reactionary monarchist movement because, again, I think deep down people understand that voting, at least on a national scale, really doesn't mean anything, at least now, and that all it really takes is to say, hey, keep acting on that thought and think maybe there is a better way than electing one of 2 slightly different flavors of the same thing.
Oh no, there really isn't. Most people are. Okay, I was talking to my family, and look, my family are very, very right wing. However, they all believe wholeheartedly in democracy. I can't even get it through to them. I said to them, I spoiled my ballot, and I got just bizarre looks from them. They said, "Well, it's your voice." Yeah, but we live in a Tory safe seat anyway.
The
Right? So my vote.
The distributors made a good point. Sorry, I'll let you continue. But is that you can do more in the time if you have some presence on social media. You can a tweet you put out can have more of an impact on politics than your vote.
Oh, of course. At the end of the day, one vote is only one vote. It makes absolutely no difference, pretty much.
I mean, of course.
Whereas political activism does.
I mean, voting doesn't mean anything. But that's really an old hot take. But the real question is that why do we do it, despite the fact that it really doesn't matter? And I think that the answer to that, I think this is definitely something Moldbug said. As in, the people who are actually running things are the civil servants, corporations, the university foundations, the mainstream media. They kind of control what are the bounds in an election. They can destroy politicians. So it's just very obvious that this is the case, and this is something that quite a lot of people can recognize. But the thing is that people just have this belief that, if there's some bad people, they can always just vote them out. But the fact that there is just this very rigid lack of political change, well, I think it's very clear that this is not a pressure release valve where you get to send out people you don't like. It's a fake pressure release valve. The whole thing.
In a way, it does work as a pressure relief valve on the public that thinks that now that we've replaced or we've gotten a new leader, a new cabinet, a new parliament, it means, oh, now we have less of a reason to be upset, even though the exact problems,
Oh,
persist.
but then they never ever actually do anything.
Well,
And
actually,
they,
I don't think that's true. See, left-wing politicians can basically, like the Democrats in the United States have been basically getting everything they want for the past 50 years.
yeah, but I think the Democrats are downstream
Yes.
from these institutions. So I think that these institutions have been getting what they want for the last 60 years. The Democrats have just been moving along, sliding behind with the Republicans slightly behind them.
Yeah,
Um,
for the Republicans or conservatism in America, quote unquote, there isn't such a thing as having, a cultural or educational or economic background the way the left has.
Sorry, another super chat from Kyle Dawson, who says Mr. Medicare coined the term basketball American.
okay.
Um, Also, everybody, if you could hit that like button, it helps out.
Smash that like button. And
Smash
be sure to
that like
subscribe
button.
and ring that bell.
Ring the bell. Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's see. There was another result that came out. Um,
Uh, a pickup for the
Blythe Valley.
Tories.
that is a conservative gain. That is not surprising. I think it's probably because you had Leave Labour people in the north of England who are absolutely sick of Corbyn's nonsense. But of course they've.
I think Labour's sick of Corbyn's nonsense.
Oh, they
Well,
absolutely
yeah.
are. People, my family all used to vote Labour, and then they said, well, look, all this mass immigration rubbish, we can't vote for it anymore. They were all working class people. They all supported, they all supported the sort of economic left, but then they just sort of said, they've gone off the rails, and they don't even care about economic left anymore. They don't care about actual, whether you agree with it or not. They don't agree with actual socialism. They just want open borders, and they just want the LGBT movement further succeeding. They just want the ever further erosion of tradition. They don't care about the workers a damn. They love talking about the working class until the working class open their mouths. Then they want them silenced for having the wrong opinion.
Well, the mechanism of democracy always targets intermediary authorities. As in, if you look at Britain in the 19th century, you see the same thing, where, for example, with the repeal of the Corn Laws, where the industrialists like Cobden and Bright, who had all this money, would use it to tell the average worker that if we get rid of all of these tariffs, then it'll be cheaper product for everybody. It'll be great, and they work together with the sort of Whig elite, they have the shared goal of wiping out aristocratic influence, and weakening intermediaries. But essentially, if you fast forward the clock like 100 years, then you have the labor movements and the trade unions, which have come out of the control of the central authority. They're independent, and so they in turn are sort of crushed. And there's no independence, and the same mechanisms of appealing to the outsiders, appealing to the foreigners, and so on.
Yeah,
Uh,
sorry, on the working class, despite coming from an upper middle class background and hopefully getting my ideal is to work as an archivist. I do have way more respect and admiration for working class people or tradesmen than I do for anybody in my class, because I completely agree with the Confucian idea that in their hierarchy, or traditionally in Chinese hierarchy, merchants and people like that were considered the lowest because they didn't actually. It was seen that they didn't actually make anything. They didn't produce. Like farmers make food, artisans create things, working class people make things, whereas merchants just move money around.
I think soldiers might be lower.
Yeah, no, soldiers are rock bottom. That's why you had like the whole like crazy stuff which happened in with the Heavenly Kingdom and all that.
I read there was something about a book I read from a book in about Genghis Khan where it basically described one of the arguments that the Chinese reason for why they kept losing against the Mongolians is because the Mongolians were eating this a meat solely based on like dairy products like milk and yogurt and meat, whereas the Chinese were like frail and effeminate compared to them by only eating grain.
With their high carb diets.
Yeah, so basically, like, just imagine these like new male beta Chinese against these like complete super jacked
Chat Mongolian.
I think that's how we can fix Mongol. That's how we can fix masculinity.
Oh, sorry, we got another super chat from Kyle Dawson. Thank you very much, man. That's going to go. Actually, have bills now that I've moved out. That's very helpful. Can you discuss Styx's assessment of a soft Brexit? Why isn't there going to be a hard Brexit from the start? What do you guys think about soft versus hard? So is soft
a very essential question.
So is soft if there's a deal and hard as if there's no deal?
Not quite. No deal is more like an extremely hard Brexit. It's hard Brexit wasn't no deal. Hard Brexit meant leaving the European Economic Community, leaving all of these things, but having some kind of trade agreement and having an agreement that, you know, the goods must flow, you know, that there mustn't be any kind of delay in things being delivered to Britain, that, you know, it will go smoothly. Whereas no deal is sort of the extreme end of just saying, we don't care what happens, just leave.
Yeah, the what happened was is that we had an opportunity to make a reasonably decent deal, but the actual establishment had absolutely no interest in that whatsoever. So they basically crafted this deal under Theresa May, which was just unbelievably awful. It was a deal which was so bad the Remainers voted against it convincingly 3 times. You know, we had to give like billions of pounds away. We would have like basically free movement round the back door, and you know, the EU courts would be above us and everything, right? It was just an absolute disaster under Theresa May. And then you had the people who were like, well, essentially, their hard Brexiteers were just forced to support no deal because there's just not a deal which would ever be created. And then, so then they came up with this whole narrative about like, well, you can't have no deal, even though it's their fault for having that. And no deal probably wouldn't be that bad, but
I reckon no deal probably would, but at this point, I don't even care. Like, this country's going to shit anyway.
We have £5 trillion worth of unfunded pension liabilities. Like, yes.
Now, I have a question. Would you be okay if it meant an end to mass immigration? Well, that's kind of a given. If it meant sort of an end to this, would you be okay if the United Kingdom broke apart and there was just England, Wales, Scotland?
Oh, well, I'm a Scottish
If
national,
that somehow
so,
would happen,
yeah.
yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, are you both from Scotland?
No, I'm
Wait, James, where are you from?
I'd rather not say.
Okay.
That's fine.
Well, just like the constituent part of the UK. Like, don't like give any specifics.
I'm very, like.
It's okay. He doesn't have to.
okay.
Really.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to get doxxed.
Okay, let's see here.
I'm almost entirely of English stock, like going back to the 1600s, and I still kind of believe the eternal Anglo meme.
And you
If
LARP
nothing
as a
else-
Prussian.
Yeah, I do LARP. Even though I'm Catholic, I LARP as a Prussian.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
Because Prussia, was, to me, it almost thinks. I think of it like if for Protestant civilizations, as far as they go, the UK, the English and American model was one way, the Prussian model was the other, and I have to say the Prussian model was a little more based.
So was the point of May to basically like just make Brexit so shitty no one wanted to leave? No
Yeah,
one would have
that's
supported
definitely
it.
what a lot of people thought. Um, a lot of people thought she deliberately sort of made a really crap deal so that people would just want to stay.
Because theoretically,
Um,
didn't she keep trying to have a vote on it?
I mean, the thing is, I don't even believe that. I think I mean, I do genuinely think that Theresa May was just incompetent. Um, and she was just sort of led around by the people who surrounded her and was easily manipulated. Because, for example, if you look at her facial expression after she lost the 2017 election, or just that election in general, where she was just like strong and stable leadership, coalition of chaos under Jeremy Corbyn, and everybody just like was like weak and wobbly leadership, and like she refused to turn up to debates. She was just a completely incompetent leader throughout her entire tenure. Um, that's just what happened.
Oh
I
yeah, I
mean,
mean, if you've ever watched any of her speeches, they're all just sort of.
like the
You
one where
can
she
tell
like
that she's
dances
very.
on like the fields of wheat, like oh, she's worse than Ed Miliband. She's way worse, way cringier.
Imagine if Miliband comes back.
I would laugh.
Why didn't you
Ed
put down the
Miliband.
rhetoric
Ed
and get around the table?
The funny thing about Miliband is that he's a man who you can't really even dislike him. I mean,
No.
I obviously don't agree with virtually anything he says, but he just seems a decent man. He just seems like he's just a funny man, honestly.
I was thinking about this. This just reminded me of what Argent said about Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is that he's sort of the Star Wars equivalent of these sort of nice guy politicians and nice guy figures that would be you wouldn't really have any problem with them if we lived in a more civilized age.
Exactly. It's
Like Peter
quite
Hitchens.
sad.
Like Peter Hitchens was all tweeting out today about how he hasn't voted in an election in 30 years. I don't think there's anything you could say that would make him happy.
Peter Hitchens, he was, believe it or not, he used to be kind of an optimist until about 2010, because his big project was just to destroy the Conservative
Yeah, I
Party.
remember that. Yeah.
He thought that if we killed the Conservative Party, because basically from 1997 till 2010, the Conservatives weren't in power. They were running out of money. And so he thought that if they just lost the 2010 election and ran out of money, we could sort of make a real right-wing party. But when they won the election, he just became like, not even black pilled, just like Peter Hitchens pilled, where he just laughs at the whole situation. He actually tells young people just like get out of Britain, like get out of.
I've thought about this. I would love him to be the commencement speaker at a university graduation because they're supposed to come in and encourage everybody. Like you've got your whole future ahead of you, and him just going, "You're all doomed. Get out while you can. The end is nigh. Goodbye."
Although to be honest,
I pretty much agree with him wholeheartedly. I don't think there's any in this country, even in
to be honest, Britain is really black pilled. Maybe not quite as bad as Canada, but like pretty bad.
Oh, I actually, yeah, Canada is extremely good as well. You know what? One strange thing I actually think is that Germany, everyone thinks they're screwed, but if you look at the policy platform of the AfD, it's actually a lot more hardline than people give it credit for.
It's the closest thing. It's like it's the closest thing to like what conservative Americans want the Republican Party to be. Like real conservatives, because I looked over it when they won a huge amount of seats, when they became the third biggest party in 2017. It is basically end mass immigration, and they even have a point about trying to restore at least like have some acceptance of traditional Christian values.
I think they also don't like feminism.
You know what's hilarious is one of their leaders, Alice Vidal, is like
Yeah.
she's like a partnered lesbian but hates gay marriage, or she doesn't like any of the LGBT stuff. Like she doesn't support it.
Sorry, I just another super chat from Kyle Dawson. He states,
Oh, wow.
"Brexit at 0 seats a good outcome? Yes or no?" I don't think there's any expectation Brexit Party would win any seats.
To be honest, Nigel Farage has been consistently correct on the issue of Brexit, but I actually personally really do not like the man. For example, he had a sort of personal sort of fight with Gerard Batten, who became the leader of the absolute joke of a UKIP campaign that was the last European election. And he just sort of took joy in throwing all of these people under the bus, and like he's moved way to the left on like all issues, but he's just this sort of Captain Ahab sort of let's get Brexit done figure, and I just don't think that's what we need at the moment. I really don't think that's what British right wing populism needs.
That's my question is, if let's say, or let's just say, finally some form of deal gets done, whether or not it's a soft or hard Brexit, what's going to happen to the sort of more dissident, or what's going to happen? What is the future for all the people that were part of UKIP and the Brexit Party?
Well, their careers
let's think on this for a little bit. The Brexit Party getting 0 seats, in my opinion, is actually a very, very good thing, because even though I reckon it probably got a lot of vote, but it got no seats, and so I think this is just going to get people in Britain to say, look, okay, Nigel Farage has failed us. This sort of moderatism has failed us. Moving to the centre doesn't help at all.
The other thing is... Oh, go on.
Also, Nigel Farage's move to the centre is way more extreme than you'd think. He, at one point, used to be he used to praise Enoch Powell and said, he said that he was a man ahead of his time, and that the only thing Powell did wrong was that maybe he went a bit too hard. Not that he was wrong, but that he should have been a bit more clever about it, that he should have been a bit more good optics, as we would call it, And now he's there. He has people in his party saying the European Union is too white, and that's why we need to leave.
Yeah, it's like the sort of early Christian heresies where you sort of have one heresy, and then you have a load of theologians who sort of rant way off in the other direction, and then they need to be rooted out. But the thing with the Brexit Party is that they need to die. We can't have a sort of like just focused on Brexit, don't care about social issues kind of party.
There should be something. There should be something coalesce into something like D.
Just a reminder, Enoch Powell was the co-sponsor of the bill that decriminalized homosexuality in the UK, and was one of the...
He was a libertarian.
He was also
he was at least right on immigration.
For getting rid of the death penalty.
As a Catholic, that's the one part of... I'm sorry to go Nancy Pelosi, as a Catholic. But that's the one aspect of the Catholic catechism that I think if I could disagree with, I would. If I do disagree with, is I am in full support of the death penalty.
No, like I go to a traditionalist parish now, and the priest just said they were full of shit. Like,
okay.
No, the thing is that I used to be a Catholic, but the thing is that you have essentially this whole paradox wherein you have old canon law which would say that death penalty is good, and then you have new canon law which says it's bad, and they're both supposed to be infallible, and nobody knows what to do.
I'm really hoping that Robert Cardinal Sarah becomes the next pope, because first off, he's like super trad. And again, any moderately conservative pope who's probably going to follow after Francis is going to without much trouble reverse most of the damage he's done. But Robert Cardinal Sarah would also make everybody's head explode, because he's a black African cardinal, but he repeatedly says we need to stop mass immigration.
Yeah, I think he's really against the refugee crisis.
He is. He absolutely is.
Oh, yeah, I've heard a lot about him. He's a very good man. He's absolutely.
Wait, is everybody here
He's
Catholic?
brilliant.
I think so. What was I thinking? Yeah, so people were talking about Mussolini's granddaughter. Yeah, Alessandra.
She looks exactly like him. It's kind of creepy.
Yeah, she does.
It is funny. She is hilarious. Just the idea of, I love my fascist grandfather. Fuck you.
The strange thing about Italian politics is that if you look at all of these conservative parties, a lot of them, they trace back to these sort of neo-fascist parties that existed during the Cold War, and then they just sort of all went moderate towards the end of the Cold War, and then tried to become conservative parties. If you look at the the Fratelli d'Italia, for example, they split up. They can be traced back to the MSI, the Movimento Sociale Italiano, and that was like this sort of radical right party. It was sort of, it's so strange how, you know, in Italian politics there's no stigma against the extreme right like there is in this country. At least not to the same
It
extent.
looks like Liga Nord and their coalition is going to win like a landslide in the next election, which will probably happen fairly soon.
I mean, I'm always really cautious with these things, but Italy looks like it's probably, in my opinion, the most white-pilled country in Europe.
Yeah, it is.
But I think that you can almost say that the countries which are more in danger are the countries further away from the epicenter of the problems, as in, you know, Britain, North America, like France. They're the furthest away, and they're they're the worst positions. Um, this is something like, for example, you see this all throughout history. Um, like, if you were to predict whether Austria or Bavaria were to become world powers, you'd say Bavaria because they have all of the good land. They have Munich. You know, why would Austria? Because they're, you know, they have a lot of mountains and stuff. Well, it's because, you know, they're right next to the Ottomans. You know, it's hard to sort of like tell a load of lies to people of how everything's fine when they're right next to the sort of the problem. And in fact, you can say the same for the Ottomans themselves. They were sort of right on the edge next to the Byzantine Empire, whereas the Karamanlids had by far the largest beylik in Turkey, but they were way insulated. And so the Ottomans were the people who came to power.
Yeah, there's something to be said about, obviously, since they were the you know, the bane of the Europeans for hundreds of years. There was still some. I think I would probably prefer them ruling over the Middle East today than what we have now, because first off, at least they had some sort of aesthetic and style, and like, you know, they were meant. It's like people talk about World War One. Well, the Germans were allied with the Ottomans who committed the Armenian genocide. Well, the Brits were allying with, you know, the fucking Arab terrorists.
Well,
Oh yeah.
keep in mind the Ottomans really hated Wahhabists. Like, they would
Yeah.
periodically invade Saudi Arabia and just like kill as many
Britain,
Wahhabists as
Britain.
they
I mean, it's really obvious to say, but Britain funded Saudi Arabia into existence, and it's not even just during World War One. It's like well into the 1920s and before that. Basically, you know, you have the sort of House of Saud, and then they had a load of sort of aristocratic rivals, and they never had enough resources to sort of take them down. But then the British gave them a load of money, and then they were able to do it. And then after they found oil, Saudi Arabia is like this terrifying dystopia where you have the ruling centralized oil sort of monarchy, and then everybody's on welfare. It's just this absolutely horrific existence.
If she was pro life, I would in a heartbeat be in favor of Tulsi Gabbard, because I think that our whole alliance with Saudi Arabia is it's almost as much as it's worse than I think our relationship with Israel.
No,
because,
it's much worse because they
Oh,
actively
well,
fund
absolutely.
most of the world's terrorism.
Yeah,
I mean, nobody. Why did you know?
Pakistan also has a lot of that though. Like the ISI have been they funded a lot of this stuff as well.
Following the fall of the Soviet Union, I think the wisest choice, at least if you're thinking geopolitically, would be for the United States to just ally with Russia, or to at least try and get on good terms with Russia, because there's a quote from Bismarck where he says, "You know what the secret of diplomacy is? Make a good treaty with Russia."
I suppose.
Because it does scare me of all these. One of the scariest things about these boomers, at least on the left, is that they still think the Cold War is on, and that Vladimir Putin is just the next premier of the Soviet Union.
Well, in a way, I mean, the Cold War kind of is on. I mean, if you look at like one of the ways you can sort of look at this is by looking at Russian internal politics, and what you see is that during the Yeltsin era, there was no hostility between the United States and Russia, but there has
We
always
were
been...
actively manipulating their elections, ironically
Oh,
enough.
yeah.
Have you heard of like the idea of like the colored revolution? Like you know, in Ukraine you had the Orange Revolution and so on. Like all of these colored revolutions are basically funded by the Americans. Like the most ridiculous example I can think of recently is the there was a Ukrainian fascist group which was funded by the
Oh, right
Americans,
sector.
and they were in the Hong Kong protests,
What?
protesting for democracy, and it's like,
Wait,
what is going on
right.
here?
Wait, so
And
right
it's like-
sector was in Hong Kong. That's...
Yeah. And it's like that's the magic of American gay ops.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, America,
I've
NATO,
heard that during. Sorry.
sorry, but NATO, they've been like building up military stuff near the border of Russia and Eastern Europe. They've been doing these gay ops. Like Russia is way on the defensive. Russia's in a really weak position demographically as well. Like Russia, it's a pretty worrying. They have a pretty good military, but like it's pretty worrying to be honest.
Yeah, that's one of the problems I have is like, as I said, I mentioned China before, is thinking, well, you know, a Trader-based China Russia is going to just somehow come in and save the West from degeneracy. No, they're barely going to be able to help themselves. If Westerners really want to help fix our civilization, it's something we have to do on our own.
Yeah, no,
I just have one other person who wants to come on, so I'll try, and if it gets too crowded, maybe
We're bringing Sargon on, aren't we?
No, we are not. If
I haven't actually
I'd let
watched-
him on.
I haven't watched anything by Sargon in like 2 years because I just don't care anymore.
I feel bad that he got kicked off of Patreon because, like, it is his job.
Yeah,
What
I-
platform is he on now? I don't even know.
Subscribe star.
Pornhub.
There was a movement when all the gun channels were getting kicked off of YouTube to move the gun channels to Pornhub. I'm not joking. That literally happened.
Happily, you know what's funny? Speaking of Pornhub, I know I don't want to say it. That's a weird way to start a sentence, but it's I finally got my ban off of. I finally got my suspension off Twitter done for saying I think we should execute pornographers. So that got me suspended. But yet the few days afterwards, everybody on conservative or right-wing Twitter and Catholic Twitter was saying we need to outlaw pornography as the next sort of, I guess, as a continuation of what Nick Fuentes did, and in just sort of baiting the fake right out. And you know, like, you know, that Chinese thought Kathy Zhu, was made fun of for some of her economic beliefs by the left and now says she's a conservative. She's like, but pornographers treat their actors very well, and pornography is right.
Oh my god, how
It's the
stupid
most
can you get?
ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to welcome Lightning Patriot on. Hey, man. Good to
Hey.
finally have you on the channel. Sorry, it's just been yeah.
I understand. It's been a while.
Did you have anything you wanted to say about the UK election?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk within our circles about the elections, and what are your thoughts about voting third party?
In America or in general?
Largely within the Anglosphere, but also in general.
Well, it does actually matter because, you know, there is, as Argent points out, as Argent knows, like, there is more or less 3 parties in Canada. In the United States, it's nothing.
Yeah, it's
I mean-
it's Coke or Pepsi, your choice. Although the Republican, it's like
Or you could just choose not to drink soda and not point.
exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Like,
which, I'm drinking
Vote
beer
Green
right
Party.
now.
I like communism.
Yeah, to me, being a monarchist is like in the Coke and Pepsi thing. I'm just gonna drink beer. It's burning around a lot longer. It's way more fun.
I don't know. I have a lot of problems with monarchism. I don't think that I don't really have a problem with monarchy, but I do have a problem with monarchism.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean. I was
Well-
thinking in the United States, if I had an ideal, I think it would be best if we had some sort of elected monarchy, wherein we just, because there's all this talk about getting rid of the Electoral College. My LARPy idea is
How about if we abolish the House of Representatives?
no, that and no, I would abolish I would abolish both houses of Congress and basically have every governor be considered an elector prince, and they can decide on who the
Yeah,
emperor
that's
is.
kind of my idea. It's like I'm not necessarily, shall you say, a reactionary. I'm kind of more of a third positionist, if you get where I'm saying there. But at
Yep.
the same time, I see if what should happen.
Oh no, the
with-
cops are after you.
Oh no,
You
it's
said something
Cops are
racist
after
on the
you.
internet.
something like
Oops.
that.
They heard the word
Police
third
is
position and
coming.
they thought, oh, shut it down.
What was I thinking of? Yeah, no, sorry. Just briefly, in Canada, we have kind of a 3.5 or a 2.5 party system. because we have the Liberals, Conservatives, then we have the New Democratic Party, which is a socialist party, and then we have the Bloc, which is a French nationalist party. So I guess it works pretty similar to how it works in the UK, where you have
Yeah, in
kind
the
of
UK,
three
you have the
competitive parties.
Conservatives.
Yeah.
In
Labour.
the United States, we have the party that's loyal to everywhere in America but the United States, every country but the United States, and the country that's loyal to Israel.
Pretty much. It's a good way of
Yeah.
putting it.
Well, like that's just so blatant. Is everybody talking about, foreign interference in the election? Can you imagine instead of APAC, the American Israeli PAC, if there was like the American Russian PAC for,
In a
Israel's-
way, what's interesting with the new Cold War stuff is that like because of the new Cold War, they're going after like foreign influence one by one. They started with the Russians, and now they're doing the Chinese, and I hear they're going after the United Arab Emirates meddling in American elections. And then you have Saudi Arabia too.
I love there's like some political cartoon where it showed like some coalition of all the evil people, or it's like I think it's like all the people that Tulsi Gabbard, because the conspiracy theory is that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian agent, because of course she is.
What?
She's
Yeah,
a Russian asset.
They think that Mommy GF is a Russian agent because she doesn't want, or she's either a Russian or
Not
Saudi.
that. She's a Russian asset.
Yeah,
Not just agent asset. Like she's being
Yeah,
paid
exactly.
by Vladimir Putin.
not wanting foreign wars and wanting to put American workers or whatever first is an evil right wing conspiracy. But
Pretty
like
much.
there was some political cartoon where it showed like evil right wingers, and it just put Russians as like the stereotype of like disgusting drunken Slavs. Like, okay, so racism against Russians is fine.
It's not
They're-
even that. Have you
Well,
ever
well, it's a-
watched like Stranger Things? Has anyone here ever watched that?
No,
I couldn't.
My family was watching it, and I saw like one episode, and it's like the evil red fascists. It's literally Nazgul. It's like they're doing the red fascist Russians.
did Alexander
Literally
Dugan show up?
Stranger Things was just so paused I
Alexander
couldn't
Dugan,
watch it.
what are your thoughts on Dugan?
Dugan's
I
a
think
I'm a
fucking
big fan of
weirdo.
Dugan.
What?
I'm a fan of Dugan because he's because I'm sort of big into Heidegger. And
Yeah.
Oh, have you seen this? I love this. There's the famous country folk singer Woody Guthrie, who had his famous guitar with a sticker on it that said "This machine kills fascists." Somebody, it's one of my favorite political images of all time. Somebody just photoshopped Heidegger's face onto his, and on the guitar it says "This fascist kills machines," and it's so perfect.
It should say, "Have you even read Heidegger?"
Have you read Siege?
No, that's what Richard Spencer said to Sargon, and it had like no context.
I love how everybody on the far right has now just disavowed him, just because just because he acts like a British euphemism for cigarette.
Yeah,
It's like, if anybody's seen his video, like I just love these burgers with the onions.
he's just
caramelized
a
onions.
really weird
Sargon?
dude.
It made me laugh. The funny thing is, I actually don't find him that bad. Look, I know that's a hot take, but I don't think he's as bad as he's made out to be. I think it's very overblown how, like, he has basically what it is that he's fine 90% of the time, and then the other 10%, but not even that, more like 1% of the things he says are just really stupid.
Like the
he
idea
said
of
he
saying
wanted to enslave Haitians. He's just crazy in that.
I
the idea-
like how Mauritian's struggle was like having a conversation with Sargon. He's like, Sargon, have you even read Locke?
but I love yeah, my biggest thing isn't he like one of the people that's like they're fine with abortion because because proportionally it kills more black people.
He
Yeah,
That's
that
disgusting.
Yeah,
Spencer, he's
that
pretty
is just
paused on a lot of social issues, and he's really entitled as well.
I wouldn't be surprised though if, like, memes aside, if the alt-right came into power, if gay rights would actually still be part of their platform. It's just a hunch I would have.
One of the problems with the alt-right was, I'll just put it politely, it was the sort of keep the black people out of our gay bathhouse sort of logic.
I call it
Yes.
heterosexual Aryan cuddling. is my term.
We must spoon for the future of the white race.
Sorry, I just a side note. It's funny. John Locke argued that atheists, Catholics, and Muslims should not have British citizenship. just keep that in mind.
John Locke was basically a hipster in the 17th century.
You know what I love is Ben Franklin had, like, in his views on, like, race, he considered Germans, French, Swedes, and basically any continental
The swarthy
European...
Swedes.
Yeah, I think he basically considered the only people that were white would have been like the Scottish, the English, and the Dutch.
Yeah, he complained about like the swarthy Swedes who were like darkening America.
I actually kind of think Locke was a moron. Like, I think that Hobbes and some of the other liberals were actually quite smart. But if you actually read some Locke, then you can see some pretty ridiculous stuff.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
When he goes after Filmer in like the first treatise, he basically just focuses everything on Filmer's biblical argument, which is like fair. But then what he proposes is also a biblical argument, so it's a bit stupid. But then the thing is that when he's talking about the sort of meat and bones of Filmer's argument and the logic behind it, he's like, "Oh, you're just a bunch of idiots, and if you let fathers have authorities, they'll like fatten up their children and eat them, like in Peru." And it's like, I'm talking to a passage in Locke, and it's like he's just this complete idiot who's basically sponsored into existence by like the parliament and people who find it useful to have his sort of anarchist ideology.
I was reading when I was responding to Sargon's video praising what's his name, Thomas Paine. Like, when I read him, like he is literally just like you now know where Christopher Hitchens and most of the new atheists got all their arguments or their mannerisms, because he just sounds like some edgy 18-year-old or edgy 15-year-old, like saying, "Oh, Christianity is kind of stupid and good," and like the most sort of disgusting. The most I got disgusted was when he's talking about how he's sort of like you can tell he's writing just like glee when he's talking about how the French priests are being like embarrassed or removed from their position, wherein during the French Revolution, like hundreds or thousands of Catholic priests were like were executed, humiliated, and like forcibly defrocked by bloodthirsty Freemasons. That's the real red pill. It's not the JQ, it's the MQ.
Yeah, the thing is his arguments in like his like biblical arguments were like, they were pretty bad. Like, he's like, in one of the Gospels it says that there was 3 women who saw the stone, and the other one it says 4. But
it's because at the end of the video I had on it, I just basically point out the problem with the classical liberals and eventually the just materialists in general is like they can't. The reason I think they can't believe in the Bible is because the Bible doesn't fit neatly within a materialist framework. It's not just like it's not another one of these like flowery treaties. And Jesus, C.S. Lewis made the point where you can't just say, oh, Jesus was just this nice moral teacher, because if you just take what he actually said, then you either have to come to the conclusion that he was lying, he was insane, or he was the son of God.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I think that actually, if you take some of Jesus's advice, it's actually terrible advice. Just like, unless God actually exists. Like, for example, turn the other cheek is actually, it's horrible advice in most real life circumstances.
Well, it's very open to debate what he actually meant by that.
I
And
know.
I like the Jesus. I love the Jesus mythicists, even though I very embarrassingly like won my or actually never. I'm not gonna talk about it. But like the Jesus mythicists, the one that just basically say, well, Jesus didn't really exist at all. Where's your evidence? Like, okay, there's huge numbers of evidence. He's one of the most well documented people in history.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I don't know. Why does it take so long in the UK to get results? Like in Canada, we'd be done by now.
It's actually, there is a reason for this. We basically count votes in a really, really slow way. Like,
Do they not release it until like it's fully counted? Is that how it works?
yeah, like there's also the way they do it is with like these really crappy volunteers, and like they do it really slowly. Um, I'd have to read up on this, but I remember reading something about that.
Because I remember I worked a poll one election. And they paid us to do it. So
Yeah, they don't do that in Britain, I don't think.
oh, okay. Well, that would explain a lot on the outset.
Let's just check. Oh, access denied.
So if anybody doesn't know, I'm gonna leave at around 8:30 because the Game Awards are on. Does anybody have any interest in that?
I don't even know what's nominated and who's
It's
even
Death
running it.
Stranding, Sekiro, Resident Evil 2 remake, Control, and Smash
Um,
Brothers. Like one of the people that I follow on YouTube streamed Death Stranding, and it's possibly the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, there's a few results which have come in now. It's like there's like 5. They're all in like the same place.
let me refresh and see. Guardian doesn't have it up yet.
I'm not even going to bother looking at them until the whole thing's released.
Yeah, because what happens in Canada is we release results for every poll that comes out. So, yeah. So we normally know like who's won within like an hour of the polls closing.
Yeah, there's like 5. I think basically in the British they come out constituency by constituency, and they they have interns do it, and like they only like they release the result in one moment. They have a big thing where like they read out the result.
Okay, here's my question: do the environmental interns count the votes?
Trees don't have arms.
They don't exist yet, luckily.
Okay. That's going to be their job. Just counting votes.
To be honest, I kind of I would love to go to an alternate reality where Corbyn won, just to see what sort of people these environmental interns would be.
Because there are people I know in these circles who... Okay, who's worse, Corbyn or Miliband? Or however the fuck you pronounce his name.
Corbyn, because Miliband, I can't imagine being as pro-censorship and
I think
as pro-mass immigration.
Miliband would probably get more stuff done than Corbyn would actually be capable of doing. And he'd probably do more damage, but as a person, I vastly prefer him to Corbyn, and Corbyn is much more
Really?
radical.
That's interesting. Because I know some people who... Like, I think it's Serp. I'm sorry, Serp, if I get this wrong. I think he would prefer Corbyn to Theresa May. Because he really, really hates Theresa May.
I really don't like Theresa May. I can see where he's coming from, but I think Corbyn would be really bad, and the right would cease to exist immediately because they'd be like yeeted off the internet.
Right.
And thrown in jail.
Oh yeah, I mean, I reckon Corbyn would try to probably ban maybe not UKIP, but he would ban the English Democrats. I unironically think he would ban the English Democrats and the British
Oh, yeah.
National Party and all of these other sort of right-wing parties. Anything to the right of UKIP, he would try to ban it. Certainly the BNP, at least, that would be banned.
Theresa May
Yeah,
was
they-
really bad on Didn't she pass like a shit ton of censorship
she did.
laws when she was in power? She
She also
kind of
tried
banned porn, which was kind of
Yeah.
based
It
He
was
tried to.
it failed.
for like it was probably for feminist reasons, but it was
It
kind
was.
of
I
based.
don't actually care though. I kind of agree with the feminist reasons.
Yeah,
behind
it was kind of based.
It might be one of the cases of they're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. So
Yeah, that and the feminist case for banning pornography, I think, is actually still true.
It
Yeah,
is.
you know, the arguments they're making is like, oh, one, it's degrading women, and two,
Well, it
it's,
is.
it's sort of
It
you know,
No,
it's
I
teaching
think,
men to
though-
view them as sort of sexual objects, which is actually a real thing that happens.
I think though for porn, it's I think though overall the damage probably definitely hurts men a lot more because of the addiction
Yeah,
to
no,
it.
it's horrible. I don't think people realize how much of a
The
social
thing is that,
ill
I
it
mean,
is.
people like make fun of the think of the children thing, but you know, you have 9-year-olds who are like 30 seconds away from hardcore.
Yeah.
pornography. That's actually
No, it fucks you up.
it
I'm not
really
gonna
does.
lie and
And
say I didn't find it on the internet and it didn't fuck me up.
Think about the idea, like the whole argument that it's it's a result of bad parenting. If it's like it's so everywhere and so easy to find, like there's only so much that parents can always do because you have to have the reality that kids have to be connected to the internet in some way in the modern world.
To be honest,
So
the
I-
libertarian right is actually my least favorite quotient of the political.
Oh, no,
compass.
they're
I mean, I know
horrible.
that's a
No, I don't
retarded
like them
diagram, but it just genuinely is though.
After
Oh,
Ron,
same here.
outside of Ron Paul, I just despise all of them.
Well, Ron Paul himself doesn't even really fall into that libertarian.
He would have been considered like you could make an argument that like in the American sense he was a pure conservative because he basically just said his libertarianism just came from an extremely strict interpretation of the Constitution, saying like we shouldn't have any government programs or
He's
oversight.
probably a
outside.
bit more of a paleocon, maybe.
But do you know who I think one of the most cringe people on the entire internet is?
Who?
Stefan Molyneux.
Oh,
Because he
Stefan is a
basically-
cringe lord. Yeah.
Because the thing is he believes in this like hardcore individualism and like and all that, and then and all the stuff which got us to the position we're in now, and then he like just passive aggressively tweets at women to have children, and it's just like
he seems like somebody that is torn between like I don't hate him as much as I don't really dislike him that much, but he seems like he's torn between wanting to hold to this hardcore libertarian philosophy, but understanding that without Christian morality, it doesn't work. Or
Thing
any
is-
I mean, I think that's his entire point, is that on the one hand, people do need to be moral, but on the other hand, you know, people should be free. But you know, at some point, he has to recognize the contradiction that most people will not be moral unless you force them to be moral.
The
And
other
when
thing,
most
of
people
course-
are not moral, society collapses, and you need to force people to be moral to prevent society from
Because
collapsing.
we live in a society.
the
Yeah.
thing that I don't
Got
You know,
attendees.
the thing that
Oh,
I've been
Hey, Lightning.
I'm surprised there aren't more libertarians that are taking the medieval pill, because thinking that if you live in the Middle Ages, the concept for most places in medieval Europe, the concept of a state that we have today didn't even exist and would have been.
Oh no, they talk
incomprehensible to
about
anybody.
medieval Iceland, and medieval Iceland was such a shit show that I think 4 people owned all the land in medieval Iceland, and ultimately they begged for the Danish government to take it over.
No, I'm saying is
Another
the vast
example,
majority.
Anarcho-monarchism?
The vast majority of shit talk on the Middle Ages, it was basically just pure anti-Catholic propaganda from Protestants and the Enlightenment, because they have to answer the whole question of, well, for 1,000 years, Catholicism rule in between our nice, beautiful, enlightened, either for the Enlightenment figures. It's like the beautiful Greco-Romans, and they were in their apparently enlightened secularism, or for like Protestants saying, well, there was like this perfect pure church that existed in the first couple centuries, and then Constantine and Satan took it over.
So someone mentions Culture Thug. So Culture Thug got banned from YouTube. I believe he is on BitChute now.
You can find him on BitChute.
I think he got banned because he was actually like a very. I was surprised when I started watching a couple of because he just seems like a really nice guy. Like he's very like calm and like measured, and that's probably why they banned him because he was too effective.
If I talk about
Yeah, no, that's the thing is that in Britain, and this is something I've noticed, they always promote like the worst possible people imaginable.
Yeah.
Like Rory Stewart, he just suddenly started appearing on the TV everywhere, and he's like the worst person I've ever met in the Conservative Party ever. And like, you know, and it's the same thing with Nigel Farage. And you know, for example, Twitter did the same thing. Like they banned
Jared Taylor.
Yeah, exactly. You knew where I was going with this. But they like, you know, Richard Spencer gets like interviews. You know, the effective people are the ones who get banned.
That's what controlled opposition actually. Like, if I ever say Richard Spencer's controlled opposition, I don't mean he's working for the FBI or he's a Fed. I mean our political opponents have said, okay, this is the least effective person we can find. Let's say he's the leader of whatever, and promote him as that.
Yep. And this is why I'm very skeptical of Nicholas Fuentes.
Yeah.
I think that Nick Fuentes is the same thing. He has, on the one hand, you see, he appeals to the alt-right by making dog whistles. You know, I mean, the whole sort of Cookie Monster thing being the biggest example of this. You know, people think, oh, you know, Nick Fuentes is based, he's sort of secretly like some kind of national socialist or something. And then on the other hand, you know, what he actually says is, oh yeah, I'm a paleo-conservative. I believe in, you know, just taking over the Republican Party and using it to our own ends. You know, on the one hand, his actual policy is not even that right-wing, really. It's basically just sort of what the Republicans were in, you know, in the Reagan era, other than he wouldn't have given them amnesty like Reagan did. And, you know, that's the only difference. And on the other hand, he also tries to appeal to the alt-right and whatnot by sort of saying these dog whistles, like talking about Israel and, you know, the Cookie Monster thing. And another thing I'd say also is they also define people who are quite ineffective. For example, Culture Thug he was someone who was arguing for third positionism, and he was banned for being he was sort of a very intellectual person. He was a very agreeable man. There wasn't a harmful bone in his body. On the other hand, there's another man named, and I don't want to get on his bad side, but there's a guy called Jackson who is kind of just openly a Wignat, and is just, you know, actually no, I should stop. I don't want to say bad things about him because, yeah.
Well,
but suffice to say, like, I think that cringier. God, I already regret the decision to say that because I'm worried now that that's going to be used against him and other things. I'm sorry, mate.
Well, I think what they're trying to do is that with Fuentes, he's trying to sort of like peel off the sort of alternative right within the United States and sort of like, yeah, let's infiltrate the Republican Party. No, Republican Party infiltrate you. And then second, they're also they also like to push the bad optics type people. Like, I'm not going to use the term Wignat, but like literally like the neo-Nazi, the Jewish neo-Nazi that they then, you know, use is like, you know, like in that interview with Fuentes, you have this like literally like
that thing is so funny.
I think you guys are too hard on Fuentes.
You're a Nazi Jew.
I think you guys are too hard. I think Fuentes' problem is just he's very young and he's a little cringy.
Yeah.
I think though, I will give him a huge amount of credit for what he did to Charlie Kirk because
that was amazing.
Especially like when you talk about
nothing
optics,
wrong with
his optics when came to just the people that showed up to ask questions was really good. It is, you don't have the neck beard, you don't have the somebody that looks like you have somebody in like a nice suit just trying to act like they're gonna take anything that sounds bad. The only like, yeah, they said like, how does anal sex help us with culture war? Now that's kind of absurdism, but again, just trying to ask. Like all they had to do, it seems like all they had to do was ask interesting questions, because these people, Charlie Kirk was so ready, like he had it down to a science of, I'm gonna answer these dumbass socialist students and say how great America is and how bad socialism is in Venezuela. But like, oh my god, somebody's asking us about immigration. Oh my god.
Okay, sorry, I just want to give my hot take on Nick Fuentes. So I think Nick Fuentes, you have to keep in mind, he's still a kid. He's very young. I think he's improved immensely. The first time I saw him, he was way more cringy than he is now. I think, like, the older he gets, the better he's going to... Like, the dude's only 21. I think in a couple of years, he'll be a juggernaut. He'll be really, really good. But it's just... He's young. He's finding himself. It's just going to be a little while till he's kind of fully geared up.
I mean, I remember when he had like a fairly long talk with a YouTuber who disappeared. I kind of know the personal reasons behind it, which I'm not going to get into, but called True Deal Tom. He's interested in like a lot of these sort of alternative far right ideas, but he's kind of trying to like punch immediately right, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Or sorry, punch just immediately left. Wherein he's sort of going after people like Kirk, and to be honest, I think that's exactly what we should be doing as a movement. Is sort of trying to really focus on taking down conservative Inc. That's the most effective thing, or not the most effective thing we should be doing, but that's the most effective target to go after.
Oh, absolutely. I think that our target needs to be the conservatives themselves, not the left. You see, and another thing is, it's a lot easier to move someone from being a conservative to being a reactionary. Maybe that's not the term we want to use for this, but for being someone on our side of things, right? It's a lot easier to get a conservative on board with our ideas than it is to get a leftist on board with our ideas. It's a much easier conversion process.
Well, I would say, like, what it is liberals, and Charlie Kirk is like a right-wing liberal. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, even like when Milo was said like, "Oh, I'm a conservative." No, you're openly supporting like sexual immorality. You're not a real conservative. In that sense, it's like you're a liberal. You're just a liberal. Just say you're a liberal.
Well, I think conservative is not really a label that I would bother trying to try and take, because it. I mean, for example, there was an essay written by Robert Dabney in the 1870s about women getting the rights to vote, where he just demolishes what he called Northern conservatism, or like the conservatives of like New England, who just completely cock on every issue. And bloody Dr. Johnson was talking about it. People, I'm not joking. People have been trying to raise this point for like 300 years, about conservatives.
I love Dr. Johnson. Sorry, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I love Dr. Johnson.
Which Dr. Johnson?
Samuel Johnson.
Oh, Samuel Johnson. Yeah.
And the High Tory gang. But the point is like we have to come up with something which is actually a strong enough movement by itself, on its own terms, because people have been pointing out that conservative Inc. is bullshit for a very long time. In fact, that's what I think the problem with the alt-right is that it was able to point out that conservative Inc. was bullshit, but it couldn't really provide an alternative, which was
exactly.
Well,
Now, my
the
other thing.
problem with the alt-right. Oh, sorry.
The other thing you have to understand is like it's the kosher sandwich, because it's like you have conservatism on one hand and you have leftism on the other hand, and liberalism's the like full kosher sandwich. So what you have to do with conservatives is point out the liberals within conservatism, the economic liberalism, And at the same time, if you're debating a leftist, you have to point out how social liberalism undermines economic socialism.
I mean,
as for the conservatives. Go ahead.
my kind of opinion on economics is I just don't think it's something you should be dogmatic about. Um, I think like a mixed economy just works, and it's kind of in every case where you've had some regulations. Um,
Oh,
That's basically almost any
and,
economic system. The point
and
is to
like
actually focus on the community
like
as opposed
some
to the individual.
protectionism, but not too much. Like
Yeah.
generally speaking, the most successful economic models have all been mixed economies. How big you want the state relative to the private sector is like an open question, but I just don't think it's really like something you need like all these
I
kind of
actually
LARPy
think that
ideologies on.
the idea of private property is actually it's kind of it's very misleading. Private property doesn't really exist in the sense that most people think about it. I think that the sort of private public distinction itself is kind of an illusion, insofar as that there's nothing which is truly private, and that's where the kind of bad things that we associate with capitalism come from. Um, Basically, if you want to set up a corporation, you have to go through a government agency. You know, the board of directors has to be approved, and a business can't operate without the state because it has to have the limitation of liability, its recognition as a legal entity, the ability, the government's guarantee of its property, a money supply which can only come from the government. Essentially, you cannot have a corporation just in nowhere. You can only have it under the state. So I think that we just need to recognize and formalize this relation between the corporation and the state as essentially like a franchise government, where the
It's
corporation.
basically literal corporatism.
Yeah, basically,
It's body.
it like for example, I think that if you look into quote unquote socialism and why it failed, and you look at specific countries like Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, or the Soviet Union, it's more or less the same pattern. It's the institution of like price controls and collectivization of agriculture. But I think that those are just due to the lack of knowledge. As in, if you have a central body, like, trying to make decisions for local people, it just kind of screws it up. But the fact is that everything comes down from the state.
I think
But I
it's
want my
One thing
state
I'd have on-
mandated GF.
I think it's arguable, and Serp has talked about this a bit in the past, that actually the most socialistic country, one of the most, might have actually been Francoist Spain in terms of how big a role. Because, I mean, it depends how you describe socialism, but if it's in terms of the workers owning the means of production, the workers had a very large say, and I think, from my understanding of how corporations were run within Francoist
No, not
Spain.
just that. The Italian Social Republic.
Yeah. So in a sense, they were more socialist. It's a very like, I think actually in Mein Kampf, Hitler writes something like, "What does the term socialism mean, anyways?"
I mean, the thing is, if you listen to the Dinesh D'Souza the whole ridiculous, like, this is the real political spectrum. They'll basically put anything that isn't boomers for Reagan as socialism or left wing. Like they legitimately think that monarchists are left wing socialists.
Okay, I gotta say
Even
something.
though-
That's
sorry.
right.
I gotta say something really I don't know if was FDR really that bad.
Yes.
Oh, he was?
He was bad in his foreign policy, but in terms of his policy within the United States, I think he was okay.
There is. I mean, I would have certainly preferred Huey Long and Father Charles Calvin.
Yeah.
Huey Long is fascinating in the fact that it's like, pre-civil rights era, white Southern Democrat politician Yeah, he's not like a member of the KKK.
He wasn't particularly racist, from my understanding. He was okay
No.
with keeping segregation. Um,
Apparently, speaking of which, there was I think in some report, there was a poll done, and in like 1940 or 1944, as late as 1944, 90% of Americans said that they would rather lose the war than have integration of the military.
That's right. Not over 90% didn't even want the war. And
Apparently, like there's document. I've seen the documents, but there are actual documents which FDR wrote or something, basically outlining his plan to force America into a war or force Japan to attack the United States.
I mean, I
the,
just find
the war with
it
Japan was
funny.
absolutely provoked. It was really, honestly, all America's fault. They
yeah, but I kind of
Oh,
hate
God.
Japan's crocodile tears. Oh, it was an aggress. Oh, America was mean to us. Well, what about what you guys did in China?
Yeah.
Well, what they did in China was,
The thing
you
is,
know, if you look at
That
what they did
was
in
the
China, it's a
reason
lot
the
more
United States.
complicated.
Yeah, that was largely the reason why the United States tried to provoke a war with Japan, because they hated what they were doing in China. Which, to be
to be
fair,
honest, the US
Well,
and
no,
Japan are on the
I,
same
I,
level.
I
Like,
do have to challenge this point of what Japan was doing in China. Like, yes, there were obviously massive. There were war crimes, but there's war crimes in every war. And if you look at the reason they were invading, it wasn't as simple. Like, to Americans, it was portrayed as just a colonial war. It was just they were trying to conquer the Chinese and add them to their empire, which was a lot more complicated than that. Because you remember, essentially, it was that the Chinese, the Japanese had funded the Xinhai Revolution in 1911. They'd sort of support that. That then basically went badly, and even
what was that?
even Sun
What was
Yat's
that
even
revolution?
The Chinese Revolution.
Oh,
yeah, and even Sun Yat-sen, who was pretty much one of the main leaders of it, he said the revolution was a mistake, and so the Japanese began to try and fund. They backed the Manchurians, who, because of course the Qing dynasty was Manchurian. They backed them, and that was why they invaded Manchuria in 1931. Because the Manchurians basically welcomed it. They said, "We are glad that they invaded. We didn't want to be part of the Republic of China. We want our king back."
Mhm.
And then the invasion of China was a bit more complicated, but it effectively was sort of, you know, the warlords in China had to be gotten rid of somehow, and Japan just said, "Look, the only way you're going to get rid of them is if we invade." Because there's only three ways it will happen. Three things will happen. One, the warlords will stay forever. Two, the communists will take power. Or three, Japan's going to have to do something.
Well, like, I just okay. Regardless, just of what you think, I hate the whole modern Japanese narrative. Japan was a good boy. He didn't do nothing. It's just racist white people. Like, if like I just particularly in anime where it's like, oh, Japan's a pacifist country. It's always been a pacifist country.
you know,
We got
it's
nuked.
like
Well,
you can have a fight between two homeless people, or you can have a fight between a homeless person and Francis of Assisi. World War II was basically a fight between two homeless people. I mean, Japan, when they went to war with China, they basically kicked the dog until the dog bit them and then shot the dog. You know, in the Mukden incident in 1931, they basically forced the Chinese, like, a provocation, and then they provoked the Chinese, and then the Chinese, like, responded, and then the Japanese, like, oh my god, how could you have done this? And then they invaded with their, you know, pre-funded people. And then they did the same thing again in Marco Polo Bridge. Like, they had a serious pair of balls. And then the Americans basically do the same thing to Japan in the Hull Note. Like, I just really have no sympathy with either side.
But there is also the argument to be made that, you know, when the communists took over, they killed 60 million people. Have the Japanese conquered China with that many of Chinese civilians died?
I mean, the
Oh, no,
Japanese
that
killed
many.
millions of people in China. And
the other
national
thing
government is trash.
people forget about the people figure this out when you study the history long enough. Like a lot of things from that war, the Japanese were the idea that they were fighting for like Japanese Lebensraum is a complete BS thing. They were fighting for a Pan Asian. They're trying to unite all of Asia.
I
That
don't know.
was
I
the
think that was
idea.
like a bullshit.
If you actually, I know I hate to bring out my weebness here, but if you actually wanted, there's actually a really good anime that's about this called Night Raid 1931. That's set in this exact period, and there's an entire episode where it doesn't focus on any of the main characters. It just shows the Mukden incident. It's basically
What
if
are
you
your
want.
thoughts
Go ahead.
on the rape of Nanking? Did it happen?
Yeah, I think it happened.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the whole Pan Asian co-prosperity sphere was like something Japan made up, and they're like, yeah, it's
Well, they're like, it's fine. Well, yeah, essentially, their idea is, yeah, we want to kick out the, the Western imperialists and unite Asia, but we get to be the leaders of it.
it's like because I'm reading a biography of the Showa Emperor at the moment, and it's so funny. Like when they're talking about it, it's funny because they mention the white peril. Because they say like one of them says they speak of the yellow peril. I say we must worry about the white peril.
White pigoo.
But it's like there's all this stuff about just like racial discrimination. It's just crocodile tears.
I mean, there was various sort of factions in the Japanese military. I can't remember. I think there's like the Kodaha faction, but anyway, the point is that like, and they got defeated in the coup. But like, there was like one faction which was like big into like Pan Asianism, but they were not the favored one at all.
Are you talking about the Society of the East?
I think I might be.
Yeah,
You know what's
they
funny is
were-
like the reason or go ahead if you want.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the Society of the East was essentially a sort of Japanese National Socialist organization, which sort of was very much into the sort of Pan-Asianism, much more like the Japanese government sort of said these things, and it was half and half. Half they did sort of actually believe Pan-Asianism, and they did want to, unite the Asian world, and half of it was just sort of propaganda, and they really just wanted to sort of expand Japanese power and secure themselves a place in the world.
I love.
Whereas the Society of the East essentially was saying, no, we need to go full on with it, because the only way we're going to win is if we start treating China as sort of an equal. Because you got to remember there were about 300,000 Chinese soldiers who served alongside the Japanese during the war, because they were just against the warlords and the communists. And so there was an opportunity for them to have actually leveraged quite a lot more than that, and tried to actually turn these what were essentially puppet governments, but try to make them legitimate and actually.
Yeah. One thing I recognize. I also, if anybody's ever seen The Man in the High Castle, I had to stop after a few episodes because like, not that it wasn't interesting, but like they kept showing how like in Japanese America, like they ban all in the Japanese occupied area, they ban all the Bibles, and like they replace like crucifixes in churches with statues of Buddha. Where it's like if you want to actually make it accurate, is first off the Japanese, had they somehow miraculously managed to win the war with the Axis and occupy the Pacific portion of the West Coast, they would have to basically be the lightest occupying force ever, and not do things like try and forcibly convert the population to Buddhism. But also, in an official, like, in a law it passed in 1940, so 3 years into the war with China, and 1 year before, the Pearl Harbor, they officially recognized Buddhism, Shinto, and Christianity as the national religions of China, or of Japan.
Well, let me tell you, the thing is, if Hitler won the war, Christianity would have been exterminated. You need to understand that.
No,
kid.
Christianity, like, most of the Nazis were, a lot of them were just, like, LARPy neo-pagans, but, like, the thing is, like, what would have happened would be the Catholic Church, like, since it was a single church, it would have had the Axis, or had liberal democracy not completely won out in the war, you basically would have had, you probably wouldn't have had a Vatican II, or you wouldn't have had this idea that, well, actually, hey, we're now going to support whatever we're not going to support liberal democracy as ordained by God.
Do you want to hear my theory about Vatican II and sort
No.
of? Well, the thing
You're
is,
going to tell me anyway.
Had the Germans won the war, and this is my own theory from what I've studied, is that Hitler was a Catholic, and he did also have a strong admiration for Luther. Not theologically, but also just sort of like, yeah, he was a German and a Christian. Had the Germans or the Axis won the war, they would have obviously. I don't think the whole Lebensraum thing was a thing either. They wanted united Europe, but what they would have done with Vatican II is that instead of it being like an American Robber Council, the new mass would have been something like a northern rite of Christianity. Like you have the Latin rite for sort of Southern Europe, which is more Latin speaking, and then Northern Europe. Like if you look at the Protestant Reformation, a lot of it was, I think, a lot of Northern European Christians were frustrated that Rome wouldn't give them the ability to speak the Bible in a more native tongue, if that makes sense.
Based on the research I've done on Vatican II, it was mostly the Confederation of the Rhine and the German bishops who were the main actors in causing it. So surely, and those were motivated by like German.
Even from what I've heard, from what I've talked to Catholic priests, or what you'll generally hear from people that aren't complete leftists in the Catholic Church, is that the actual had the Church just strictly followed the text of what Vatican II document said, it wouldn't be nearly as we wouldn't have the problems. Yeah. We wouldn't have clown masks. We wouldn't have gay priests. Because it basically, one of the an example my priest said is it basically said that the ideal form of worship music is Gregorian chant. It's the idea that the people that wanted some form of reform, allowing vernacular mass, the idea that the people then Cardinal Ratzinger or Karl Wojtyła were okay with guitar mass is probably not true at all.
The other thing is, and this is more or less what happened, what Vatican II has become, is that basically the Pope stabbed the Axis in the back, and they repeatedly did so, even towards many Catholics who were loyal to the Church in the crusade against the godless forces of Marxism and capitalism. Because the Pope stabbed them in the back and they sided with the Americans, and this is kind of funny because you see it during the Cold War, they gin up this thing about liberation theology.
Well, Pius XII,
they completely ignore all of the errors of America, of American influence within the Church and capitalism. They focused on communism as opposed to capitalism.
Pius XII managed to prevent all of the Vichy supporting bishops from getting expelled, except from two.
So
actually,
oh, that's right. It's my stream. So I don't know. I think what was happening was you had Vatican II, from my understanding, is very ambiguous. So from my understanding, Paul on a scale of 0 to 10. John Paul II, 0 being the most liberal and 10 being the most conservative. John Paul II interpreted it like a 4. Francis is a 1. And Ratzinger was a 7.5. Because a lot of the trad groups were kind of reconciling. I think the SSPX was almost reconciled. And a lot of stuff was just heading in that direction. Because I think he also said a lot of Vatican II is up for debate. I think he said it was pastoral in nature and you didn't have to accept it or anything.
There's so much internal politics in the SSPX which led to that.
And things were actually going pretty good until the current situation.
So what happened with Vatican II is it's pastoral, but it's semi. It is a pastoral council, so I take it as authoritative, but not doctrinal. So, anything that's said, it was made political to orient itself away from being like the Catholic Church being the church of European civilization, but being the church of
Global
decadent
civilization.
I mean, I
Decadent
don't know what.
Western liberalism that was created by freaking Anglos,
I will say I was
the
thinking of a
Atlanticists.
I was thinking of an alternate history that doesn't have to do with Germany winning World War II. I know, surprise, but it would be like, what if just a thought of if following the Glorious Revolution in 1688, what if James II had instead of fleeing to France, fled to Ireland and successfully led a revolt and like basically became king of a Catholic Ireland?
I mean, James the Second, I think just politically kind of screwed himself. I think the idea that he was going to make England a Catholic country again was just not politically viable.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's possible.
He probably could have gotten it so that there was just freedom of religion, so people could be. By freedom of religion, he could have just put maybe the two legal religions would be like.
He could have basically had like a piece
Anglicanism.
of he could have had like a treaty of a piece of Augsburg.
Yeah, where you can be Anglican or Catholic, or I guess in Ireland, in Scotland, Presbyterian. But he probably could have tried to ban some of the other like more radical
The thing you
sects.
got to remember though is that the Catholic population in Britain just basically disappeared overnight after the Glorious Revolution. Like it was like gone. It was really fast. Like these things can change quite quickly. But what I think was impossible was James II was he'd inherited a situation where it was irrecoverable for the absolute monarchy. They'd been in an extended battle with Parliament over the last 100 years, and they'd lost. Like, the sort of Whigs had much more power and money than the equivalent Tories did. He was just never going to succeed. I mean, he wasn't a bad guy though, James II.
I can't remember if it's him or one of the Charles that there's actually like a movement to canonize them as saints.
There's a movement to canonize James II.
Yeah.
Charles I was too much of a screw up to consider sainting him, even though he was a
Like,
good
if we were talking about like shame for the British Empire, I don't really think there should be for like, helping Africa or like colonizing Africa, Australia. For Ireland, I can definitely see like, yeah, a lot of what England did to Ireland is really really bad.
Of the
Yeah.
things the UK did that I think were bad, I think the worst was either the Opium War or the Boer War. I think those were both bad, and a lot of the stuff that happened in Ireland. The whole I don't think the UK really did that much wrong in India, to be honest.
I mean, Britain had I
That's
would
a
say
bot-
that we kind of really tinkered around a lot with Indian culture in ways that I find uncomfortable. But I mean, compared
Such
to
as what?
what?
Like
Well,
what?
like Hinduism is not a real term. Like it just
Ah.
really isn't. It's something which was basically created by the British in order to sort of lock India down into an easily categorizable like culture, which could be absorbed.
Right, but I mean, they for my kind of thing is they did end the total chaos of the collapse of the Mughal Empire, because India was like a real shit show.
I always love how
yeah.
ridiculous. If anybody's ever played Empire Total War, which is the least historically accurate game I've ever seen, is that the Maratha Confederacy, which was, I guess, this very very loose, weak confederation in southern India.
They did pretty good. They took a lot of.
Well, I don't think as shown in the game, I don't think they managed to completely conquer all of India into a unified empire and destroy the Ottomans.
The Mughals.
No, the Maratha.
Yeah, the Marathas. The issue with them was sometime I have to have my I have an Indian friend who knows a lot more about this kind of thing, but I think they were very I don't know if pastoral is the right term, but they were very focused on like horsemen and horses and that kind of thing. And because of that, they were just kind of culturally incompatible with most of India. Maratha's actually made a pretty good go at it. I have to say though, these election results, like the polls have been closed for like 2 hours now, and like barely anything's come in.
Yeah, it was probably a bad idea to do a stream about a British election. I mean, these things come out glacially.
Yeah, but I don't know. People enjoy these. It's a good time
Yeah,
to have
fair
like guests on and stuff like that. So, well, like views. I don't want to be Mr. Views, but it's good views.
So far, it's been pretty predictably, pretty predictable as to what the exit poll's been. There's been essentially one conservative gain in Blythe Valley, but the rest is exactly as what you would have expected.
Oh, Arjun, since there's really not much to talk about with the elections and nothing's come in quite as, I'm so glad you basically agreed with me on every point when you watched the movie Stories to Tell in the Dark. Because, yeah, that could have been the first movie I walked out of. I stayed to the end, and it was just as disappointing as you can imagine.
I have ways of getting like discount movie tickets. If people ever wonder why I go see so many shitty movies, I don't actually pay full price for them. So like, if you're thinking I'm paying like $20 to go see something, like that's not the case. But yeah, I did not enjoy that.
I loved your statement that apparently the evil Richard Nixon was so evil. He opened a portal to hell that let monsters come through. Even though like the reason why, I think in the movie explains the reason why is basically just as blue pill, or is just as left-wing masturbatory material, as this evil racist white family was poisoning the water supply, and like the only person who remembered is their woke black nanny that like said, oh yeah, they released this curse and they didn't understand their daughter, so like they locked her up.
This is okay. Middlesbrough just came through. That was it was a Labour victory, but there was an independent candidate who got half the vote.
I think they're gonna win. Like, I think they're gonna do pretty well. In any kind of first past the post system, if you have even like, if you have a lead of even like 3 or 4 points above the other person, you tend to get a pretty big majority. And I think they were up like 7 or 8 points over Labor. They were up a lot. It's weird that Labor even still exists, because in a lot of countries, well, no, I guess not. Maybe Canada's just the weird one, because in Canada the Liberal Party is the main force on the left rather than the Socialist Party, which is kind of different. But
the Labour Party, it just doesn't stand for Labour in any meaningful sense anymore.
Right, that's
It's
true.
just the name. I mean, for example, the Tory Party, the name Tory stopped meaning anything after the Jacobites failed, when the Filmerites got purged by the Liberals. I mean, these names were just there historically.
You know who's a meme? Margaret Thatcher.
I'm not a particular fan of Thatcher.
No, Thatcher. I think she was one of the driving forces to legalize abortion.
Oh yeah.
So was Reagan.
Was Reagan?
Or some, I think it was something like he helped. I think it's like he voted to legalize it. Yeah.
But Reagan was a conservative.
It's interesting because in Canada, Brian Mulroney was going to implement one of the stricter laws on it in the Western world, but a last alliance of elves and men, aka the pro-life and the pro-abortion movements, voted it down together. Because it made like exceptions in the case of like incest and rape. So the pro-life movement preferred to have no reform to not having it 100%, which is something that always irritates me personally. But yeah.
That's the sad thing. Speaking about abortion, of what's happened in Ireland, you can just have, like, to me at least, it shows why how like a perfect example why democracy is evil in the sense that it's literally the case of, you know, a majority of the population voting to eliminate the right to even be alive of the most vulnerable portion of the population of Ireland.
Someone.
Like,
Oh, sorry. Go on.
like what's happened to Ireland, which, you know, was of course always considered this sort of beautiful, pristine, ancient Catholic country. Like how quickly the modernists have taken over and are ruining is really sickening.
So
I
like.
think Ireland
Oh, sorry. Go
is
on.
like a sort of. Sorry, go ahead, Arjun.
I was just gonna say. So a friend of mine explained to me what happened with Ireland. So when the English left Ireland, there was really no elite. From my understanding, like cultural, artistic, or political elite, or anything like that. So all they really had to kind of hold them together was Catholicism. And once that kind of stopped being an important societal force, all that was kind of left was just really shit tier liberalism. And that was
The
kind
other
of the
thing is
explanation I've heard.
The other thing is that all the strong sort of nationalist, revolutionary characters who had a sort of more balanced view of Ireland, rather than just the sort of Catholic conservative aspect. Most of them just died in 1916.
Yeah, what people like James Connolly.
Yeah.
I was reading about this, is that, like, it is sad, like, you know, like the start of Irish independence was, you know, 1916 with the Easter Rising, or, you know, the Irish War for Independence. Ireland's history is basically them getting screwed over, because I recall, like, right before the Great War started, the British were about to have like a referendum or a vote on, or basically were about to grant Ireland like self governorship or home rule, sort of like Scotland. But then the war happened, and like one of the reasons why the Easter Rising, like when you actually look at it, only a few hundred people were actually involved. It was way smaller than they thought, and it was largely because the shipment of German. It was largely because I think the shipment of German weapons. Like the Germans shipped like 14,000 Russian rifles and like 4 million rounds of ammunition on a ship, and it just got intercepted. So the Irish were like, "Oh, we don't have anything to fight with now," and like a huge number of the rebels didn't even show up.
Yeah, well, I think that the reason why Ireland got sort of taken out so fast is that I think there was a certain amount of planning here. Like if you look at, for example, all of the sort of places where the refugees got sent, it's like these like famous Irish cultural milestone towns.
Like the small places where they still speak Gaelic.
Yeah. Like it's actually sickening, and like I think that it's almost like the globalist elite want to like take Ireland as a trophy of how fast they were able to like change things. Like they were able to get Ireland to become this. I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of like foreign funding and all the referenda, you know, people getting bussed over. These were obviously not equally fought things.
To me, it's the same thing with the Confederate monuments states. I don't think the Democrats, like, they obviously don't really care about the symbolism because like they didn't say anything about it before, or it was lukewarm. I think my pet theory is that it's since they now know there is some form of dissident right wing, or because of Trump getting elected largely because of people that live in the South, is they wanted to basically show this is how much power we have. We can take whatever cultural symbol you hold sacred and we can destroy them overnight with no vote, with just whatever our elites, you know, in, because these things are like the decisions to get rid of these monuments, they were never held by like votes in like state legislatures or by referendum. It's always just by whatever the city council, who's controlled by Democrats, because the cities are mostly black anyways, say. No asking the people that wanted them there. It's just, we need to get rid of them. They're all racist. Like, shut up, white man. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, it's well, that's kind of why I am more leaning towards the idea of a democratic system, in the sense that you have like referendums and stuff like that. Even in fascist Italy and National Socialist Germany, you had referendums. It wasn't
Well, they consider
like
themselves democratic in the sense that, well, we're carrying out the will of the people. It's just carrying out the will of the people through a dictator as their avatar rather than voting.
our enemies.
No, Nazi Germany and
Yeah,
Italy.
National Socialist Germany. Yeah, yeah. They elected a leader, but like
Not
that's the thing is like
quite the National Socialists. I think they had the plurality of the votes in the Reichstag, but it took some coercing or strong arming to get Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as chancellor.
yeah. The other thing is, but in regards to the United States, if you look into, I've kind of bounced around with like the Federalists, is that the Federalists really were. I wouldn't say all of them were bad, but there's this sort of element of the like you'll see shitlibs repeat this statement of the rule of law and the liberal democratic framework that's not neither liberal nor democratic. That the courts get to dictate what is the law as opposed to the people through referendum, like direct democracy versus, we live in a republic, we have the rule of law, as opposed to a direct democracy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it fascinated me on that the same type of people would say, well, the popular vote won for the Brexit referendum in 2016. That's great for democracy. And then when Trump won because of the electoral vote, not the popular vote, they're like, well, that's because it's a republic. It's like, well, which one is it?
Well, I wish they'd just say we don't care about democracy, we just care about winning, which I would be okay with.
Well, what's funny, I'll bring up Dugan again. He forced Francis Fukuyama to define democracy as the rule of minorities over majority, which if you have a rule of a minority over majority, what is that called? Oligarchy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we live under, and that's what I like to say. Instead of us having a liberal democracy, we have an oligarchic tyranny.
Francis Fukuyama was like the Antichrist.
What?
I'm just saying how shitty Francis Fukuyama was.
He's actually,
I mean, you have all that. You have all and like, hey, we're the only ones left. The Soviet Union's gone. We can just have good interest rates and high GDP growth forever. Oh no!
I do think in some ways he was kind of right.
Great on paper. My idea sounded so great on paper. Why did this happen?
Like, I think Islam will eventually become paused. I've maintained this for a long time. I think Islam...
The Saudis.
I really agree with that.
I think they're all going to legalize gay marriage and get on board with all this stuff, and then...
CIA closed the door. Well, that's the thing. They want to liberalize Islam. That's like what they want to do.
I love how like true liberals think that we did Reformation in Islam like they had in Christianity. It's like, no, that's the Reformation in Christianity had nothing to do with actual. It wasn't like, oh, liberal, proto, classical liberals took over Christianity. No. There's a hilarious clip from a Prager University video where it shows the evolution of liberalism, and it starts with it boasts Martin Luther and Henry VIII as champions of liberalism.
Yeah, fair, I actually kind of agree with that.
Well, you can make got a wife, so I better kill you if you go out with the pay.
Especially considering I made St. John Fisher as my confirmation saint, and I have a deep love for the English martyrs. I just have an absolute hatred or despise Henry VIII as being the biggest although I think more Catholic martyrs died under Elizabeth. Apparently I'm fine with not really liking the Protestant rulers of England because I think according to a papal bull, English Catholics have no obligation to follow.
I think that was really stupid of the Pope.
I mean, here's one thing that if you look at the development of radical Islam, it's something which goes totally hand in hand with the expansion of the power of the ruler at the time. As in, for example, right now you see Erdogan, who is sort of using the sort of rural Muslims to sort of break down local nationalists. As in, if everybody is like a Muslim and interpretation of the Quran, which he's introducing, then he can sort of break down all of the different local people and then have everybody just support him. And you can see this, he's like reformed his position as, to be more presidential. He's taking more power for himself. And you can see this again earlier in Pakistan with General Zia, who, when he gets to power in 1977, he sort of builds something like maybe 40,000 of these like Islamic schools, and and he fights the Pashtun nationalists. He uses the ISI. They're funding these sort of these literalist interpretations, Wahhabist interpretations of Islam. You see the same thing in Saudi Arabia, and I think that's highly analogous to Protestantism.
I don't think Erdogan is like a Wahhabist. The thing you have to keep in mind is Turkish
He's an
nationalism
Islamofascist.
is literally like something the Young Turks made up in like the 1910s or whatever. It's traditionally the Turkish. Traditionally, I think the term Turk was actually an insult. The idea was the Ottoman Empire was Islamic Empire. It's a very loose metaphor, but the Caliph was like the Pope, kind of. Because keep in mind, the Ottoman Empire at its peak controlled Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, Constantinople, and Cairo. Oh, and Baghdad. So every important city in Islam. And the thing that kind of bound it all together was Islam. Like there was very little unrest within the Arabic provinces, even within World War One. It's very overstated how big the Arab revolt was. A lot of the Arabs were just willing, even if it was under a Turkish government, because it was the leader of Islam, of Sunni Islam.
What was actually really funny was they also really, really loved Kaiser Wilhelm, because the Turkish government especially, because like after the Crimean War, like the fact that the Germans were like the only country saying, "Hey, we're now actually going to be on your side to like hedge against Russia, France, and Britain." Like the Turks, like it's described when Kaiser Wilhelm made his big diplomatic visit to Jerusalem and Constantinople in 1898. They basically said it's like when Jesus was riding through Jerusalem, and I think when they actually officially declared the jihad in 1914, a lot of Muslim Turks even considered they had this theory that they called him Hajj Wilhelm because they thought he was a secret Muslim, because he just tried to have like really friendly relations with the Ottomans. And I think like people talk about how bad Wilhelm was as a diplomat, but like the fact that he managed to get the Ottoman Empire just to completely, go along with whatever Germany wanted is actually pretty
I've
awesome.
kind
I
of
think
done
like
like
the
a
first
180.
mosque in Germany was built by Wilhelm.
What?
The first mosque in Germany was built by Wilhelm.
I've done
Really?
kind of a 360, and like they're still evil and they're still the enemy, but I do kind of like I think the Ottoman Empire was a very impressive state. Like you can't really argue with success. They ran it pretty well. Like the Middle
Like,
East
the
was
early
peaceful.
days is when you had the Janissaries and stuff like that, but by World War I, it was basically kind of like a proto-fascist empire.
The fact that you had it run for like well over 100 years, longer than anybody thought it would.
I mean, the Middle East was largely at peace. Like you had the wars with Persia periodically, but up until Egypt declared independence, and even kind of after that, you had a relative stability and peace in the Middle East to a degree you haven't had anywhere near since then.
I mean, I think that the
Supports the like Trump started the trade war because he wanted to assert American economic independence. But at the same time, you have these hardliners like Soros who want basically to treat China like Russia, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think that what the Americans are doing in China through the National Endowment for Democracy is that they're sort of they're funding people in like Tibet, Hong Kong, and like Xinjiang in order to like essentially get China to focus on its internal issues, and the same thing with the trade war, so that they're not like going to Africa and
I think that's what Dugan wanted is in his treaties in the late
He
90s.
originally wanted to break up both China and Turkey.
But anyways, like in his book, he basically said like he wants Russia to found literally every dissident group in the United States, if it's whether it's black or white nationalism.
Yeah.
Anyways,
He,
I
he-
had a
well,
lot of
he started that with to some degree he supported the I know this will sound cringe, but like he supported like Black Lives Matter, but he wanted to steer it into like a black
A
identitarian thing.
Nazbol.
Yeah. He'll cite black identitarianism, and then he'll get the white identitarianism, which is
Anyways,
kind of.
I
like
had a
where
lot of
we are.
fun. I'm gonna go watch the Game Awards. Have a good night.
Okay, Night Fritz, thanks for coming
Okay.
on.
I've also
Cool.
been drinking, so I don't want to embarrass myself more.
See you, Fritz.
It's awesome whenever Serp drinks. Hopefully, when we do the American election, he'll get drunk again. It was pretty funny when he was on because he had like drunk way too much and he started like crying because he thought Hillary was gonna win. He's like, I don't want to die in a nuclear war because he was
Yeah,
certain
that was
that
me too. I mean, I was just kind of coming back to the faith, and I was just like, I'm not ready to die.
Well, it's just because he thought that Hillary was gonna start a cataclysmic war with Russia.
Yeah, I had that theory too if Hillary would have won. But that's the other thing with like if you've kind of noticed, there's sort of a saying that the last stand of globalism will be nationalism, and you're starting to see that within the Anglosphere. Is like they're trying to consolidate their power
Oh
by
wow!
sort of leveling sanctions.
What? Oh,
against
what?
anyone.
Did some results come out?
Yeah, that was a really bad result for Labour. In Wansbeck, they won it, but they got 17,000 votes, and the Conservatives got 16,000. That was minus 15%. Like they're really getting hammered in a lot of these marginal constituencies, and I mean it was a result because it's first past the post, but like that's a really bad sign for Labour.
Mm-hmm.
Like so far, we haven't seen any like crazy stuff, but that was pretty bad.
No.
Yeah. But what else was I saying with this? But the thing is that I think what they're going to do with Trump in 2020 and the Republican Party is that they're going to like shift America first, but I'm most likely concerned is that they're going to shift it in a way that they're basically going to turn America into like the last base of global homo against the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like part of what you're seeing with like how I see the Hong Kong riots is that basically it's them trying to assert their last bits of influence on China. And then the other thing with Brexit is also Britain is the one state in which the United States is able to influence Europe. And when Britain leaves the European Union, already there's been stuff with like the Normandy format on the war in Ukraine is that Russia is trying to basically get a lot of the other EU countries to move. The entire European Union theoretically could be moved away from the American sphere of influence and be turned into its own independent bloc to be like the Fourth Reich.
China's much stronger than the Americans think it is. And I think that the only interesting thing about Hong Kong is how unbelievably obvious it was that it was an American experiment. I mean, there's just so much American flags and stuff.
The Anglos started it through the Opium Wars.
Is it going to be the Yellow Revolution?
By drug dealing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they call it that.
I know.
Yeah. But
like, yeah, the Chinese actually have a pretty decent control over Hong Kong. Basically, Hong Kongers are just like these really basically most Western trade through China used to go through Hong Kong, and now like most other Chinese cities are pretty much on the same level as Hong Kong, and so it's losing its status,
Yeah.
and that's
The
really
other,
what that's
I will
why
make
the
a
Americans do it.
counter to that, which is that I met a lady at my college who's like she's like 70 years old and she lived in Hong Kong, and she said like, these young people, they do not know what it was like when Hong Kong was separate. When it was separate, we could not get a lot of food. When we were part of Britain, and that's when we are united with China. We were united with the mainland, and we got cheaper food. These young people, they're yelling at their parents, and the university is putting American university is putting poison in them and turning university
Yeah,
into a terrorist bomb making factory.
I mean the
The young
basic
people do not know. Yeah,
when an area loses status, they get really resentful, and
yeah,
so Hong Kong they're trying to associate themselves with places they associate as being high status, like Japan and America, and
yeah.
and they're
That they
trying
would
to
move with the
differentiate
West.
themselves
They have a
from the
bad
mainland.
case of notice me senpai, is how I describe it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. The other comparison that could be made is like the opposition protests in Russia, like in like 2013 or whatever. Like you had a lot of young people who didn't live through like they were very young when Perestroika happened. Um, I think that's what it was. When they were private under Yeltsin, like they kind of missed all the troubles in the 90s. They were too young to kind of realize that.
Hmm.
And that was like when you had those opposition protests in Russia, but like the older people recognized what happened when the Soviet Union fell and how it was unstable.
Oh,
And
the
that's the
first
same
result
thing
from
is that you
Stalin's
have
time.
a lot of people who oppose these riots in China. Um, it's like that lady was like a similar thing. It was like when we were part of we were separated from mainland China. It wasn't so good. It was basically think of if like New York was separated from the rest of the United States and how they would get food and stuff like that. And like if Britain took New York and we're still hostile with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a really good result for the SNP. Everybody took a bashing except for them.
Oof.
I mean, the SNP are actually by far my least favorite party
Yeah,
in the
they're
whole of
awful.
the UK. They're
Yeah.
really bad. They're like the Bloc Québécois except much worse.
Yeah,
Um,
at least the Bloc Québécois have like ties with groups like La Muerte and some of these Quebec nationalist groups. Do you remember when there was like all those Quebec nationalist rallies? I think it was like after Charlottesville up in Quebec, Argent.
I don't recall that, but that sounds plausible.
Yeah, there were a lot of there was like an explosion of Quebec nationalist activity in like late 2017, early 2018, and that's why they had a huge surge in the Canadian election.
Right.
yeah, the Scottish government recently, the SNP recently added like mandatory LGBT education for children, and it's like it's really bad. I'm pretty sure Canada's like at the same level, but like it's really bad
Yeah, but
compared
it's
to the rest.
hard to be as positive as the UK. Like, the UK is really
Honestly,
bad.
Yeah,
England right now, I like to say is like a repeat. It's like Cromwell's zombie. That's the modern UK.
yeah. Primary schools and secondary schools are required to have a curriculum to promote LGBT identity and lifestyles. Ugh. They
I
also
think
did like
it's
a
like
bunch of weird stuff. Like they banned gingerbread men, and it now has to be like gingerbread people. I mean, that's some boomer tier stuff to
That's
complain about,
really
but
boomer.
it's just indicative.
they're gingerbread people. Remember the it's isn't it like the Warren Christmas kind of thing, like Happy Holidays as opposed to Merry Christmas, like that kind of BS.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another big gain from the Conservatives. In what is it? Just like Penrith in the border.
Right.
And that was a Conservative gain. They got plus 7.5. Labour were at minus 12. That was yeah, they got 49% of the vote there.
Well, I think I might end it here. We've been going for 2.5 hours. It doesn't look like all the results are going to come in anytime soon. And I'm starting to get kind of tired. So thanks for coming on, guys. I really appreciate it. I think we had a lot of fun.
It's 1:30 in the morning here in Britain.
Yeah, I'll let you guys get to bed.
Yeah, I need to get to
Yeah.
bed.
Thanks for coming on, guys. I really appreciated it.
Well,
Yes,
thanks for having me
campaign
on.
assemble.
Well, I just want to say good night to everybody. God bless. We'll see the outcome tomorrow. And God willing, Serp and I will be on and we will talk about could Germany have won World War II?